The task is to get to the hospital within 30 minutes. If you stand still for a long time, you will be attacked by a mystery, and it is important not to get lost. The boy stands in the lantern light. A cobblestone path spreads out beneath his feet. Fireflies are flying around. Guy touches the lantern, marveling that it, even in such hot and humid weather, retains a modicum of coolness. He stands among the trees and enjoys the smell of the earth, the leaves, and the moist air. It is very familiar to him, but it is no less beautiful. Everyone says this mysterious world is real, and at first glance it seems so. Birds fly over the building in front of the mountains in the distance. 10 minutes ago the classroom was abuzz. The students are in recess, all busy doing their own things. One of the students wakes up Xiao Che, who had fallen asleep with a book on his face. Xiao Che wakes up with saliva at his mouth. The waking man asks if he has found a way to pass the test and asks him to cover for him. Another disciple says that in the secret world one cannot rely on looks alone. Xiao Che says that if the one is jealous, he can just say so. A girl with a blue notebook under her arm enters the classroom. The students hurry to take their seats because she is the head teacher. The guy who wakes up is named Jian Che, and he's a time traveler, and this world is pretty much the same as his old one. The disciple in the background prays for luck and safety on the mission. The difference between this world and the one Jian Che came from is that there is more than one reality in this world. There is a secret world in this world. Jian Che became alert and concentrated. The headman gets everyone's attention and says that the difficulty isn't too high this time, so there's no need to worry. The disciples sigh in relief, but remember that they have been told this before. Others decide to leave the world as soon as the resurrection attempts are over. Since the first appearance of the secret world, it has shown up time and time again in different places in the real world. A man sits in the toilet and looks at his phone. Mankind has decided to put a boundary between them. A monster covered in blood appears in front of the man. The secret world is inhabited by creatures with self-awareness. The monster looms over the screaming man, who attaches electrodes to him. Such high-ranking creatures are capable of destroying an entire city. 3 horror movie characters stand on a mountain of bloody bodies. Once people were able to obtain the Stone of Cunning, with which they stopped sudden breakthroughs, and were able to voluntarily visit a secret world with the possibility of resurrection. The headman wishes everyone good luck, and reminds them to get out as soon as the resurrection attempts are over. Today, Jian Che will visit the mysterious world for the first time. The head teacher starts the countdown. She starts with 3. On the count of 2, all the students clenched their fists and tensed up. On the count of 3, the head girl pressed the button on the Cunning Stone device. The trial of the secret world begins. Jian Che walks through the forest and looks at the interactive sign with blue letters. Jian Che's character has level 0 and 50 units of arcane strength. He is surprised, as he usually only has 10 points of strength at level 1. He chuckles and decides it's a special enhancement due to his attractive looks. He notices the testing place, Huangquan Hospital, in the distance, and thinks that he will get there not in half an hour, but only 10 minutes. Suddenly, a female figure appears behind him and greets him. Jian Che's legs shook in fright. He bulges his eyes and doesn't understand why he encountered the mystery in the first place. The girl with the mask on her face starts groping him and asking him if she is beautiful. Jian Che starts nodding frantically. She pulls the mask away from her mouth and asks if she's already beautiful. Cracks spread across her face from her mouth. She smiles widely with her ugly mouth and pulls out her red scissors. She asks if he still thinks she's beautiful. Jian Che turns pale and cries out in fear. He realizes that he is facing Kuchisake Onna, a vengeful spirit woman. Jian Che tries to calm down and squeezes his eyes shut. He tries to recall the information about this mystery since they had covered it in class. He realizes disappointedly that he hasn't memorized anything. He begins to sweat profusely and realizes why he is a failure. Kuchisake Onna holds up a huge pair of scissors to him and asks, with her mouth wide open, if he thinks she's beautiful. He opens his mouth. On either side of his neck are scissor blades. He turns pale and sweaty, but begins to mumble inarticulately, folding his arms in various gestures. He begins to slowly back away from the spirit, muttering, drooling from his mouth and gesticulating. Kuchisake Onna doesn't realize what's happening. Jian Che starts to run away with a happy expression on his face. Taina suddenly realizes that he has decided to deceive her. Jian Che turns around and says that he ran the 100 meters in 10 seconds and she can't catch up to him. Kuchisake Onna overtakes him, causing him to be completely shocked. Her eyes glow and her mouth opens even wider with sharp teeth. She yells that if he thinks she's beautiful, she'll make him the same. He yells that he doesn't understand her Japanese. She holds out the point of the scissors in front of him and asks if he thinks she's beautiful. He puts his arm forward in a defensive gesture and asks her not to chop from his shoulder. He does a backward somersault, dumbfounding Kuchisake Onna, who clutched the scissor ears in her hands. Jian Che puts her thumb forward and smiles, asking if she feels sorry for him. She turns pale, a wreath of anger on her forehead and a perplexed expression on her face. She thinks he's completely insane. She raises the scissors above her and asks if she is beautiful. He starts to run away and asks her to stop chasing him. They freeze in front of each other, hesitant to make the first move. Jianche pales and doesn't understand how she manages to move so fast in heels. Kuchisake Onna steps forward and asks if he thinks she's beautiful. Jianche freezes in front of her. He frowns his eyebrows and notices her repeating the same thing like a teacher to a stupid student. She materializes a pair of scissors and points the point at him. She has a mysterious smile on her lips. She notices that he is deliberately not answering her and decides to torture him a little, because to improve performance, you can also depart from the regulations. She launches her scarlet scissors forward with a sweep of her finger, aiming straight at Jianche. He covers himself with his forearms and realizes that something was said about it at first. The system detects the hidden threat and activates the defense. A black disc appears in front of Jianche and repels the scissor strike. Kuchisake Onna frowns her eyebrows in fury and asks what he did and how he managed to block her attack. The system gives him a clue that says her ugliness and loneliness are driving her to revenge, but all she wants is love. Jianche widens his eyes in surprise and opens his mouth, reading the clue. He smiles and rubs his hands together happily as there are clues in this format. And now he is not afraid of anything. He calls Kuchisake Onna an ugly monster and says he'll give her peace tonight. Mist stops and is alarmed. He sticks out his middle finger in her direction, and the system announces that, once the clue is read, the protection disappears. The message starts to disappear. Jianche opens his mouth and opens his eyes in fright. He doesn't understand why everything is missing. He stretches his pants and tries to find a dragon-slaying blade, a sacred bone, or a sword in there. He asks the system for another clue. He yells that Kuchisake Onna's attack was only blocked by the interface. Taina gets angry and asks how dare he tease her. She says she hates men who act like Jianche the most. He looks back with a goofy smile and turns pale. He realizes that this time she is very angry and now she will definitely finish him off. He can't stay calm because of fear. She leans forward and tells him to finally answer her question. There are glowing red cracks on her face. She asks if she's beautiful. Kuchisake Onna opens her eyes wide with rage and her mouth begins to ooze blood. Jianche picks up Kuchisake Onna under her shoulder blades with one hand, throwing her backwards. He wraps one arm around her ribcage and the other supports her under her thighs. Mystery opens her mouth in shock. Jianche brings his face closer to her. Kuchisake Onna opens her eyes and asks what he's up to. He looks at her from under his eyelids and realizes that even though he doesn't remember the teacher's words, he has a great head for stressful situations. The system gave him a clue and hinted at what he should do. He should give Kuchisake Onna what she craves. The clue must be that Kuchisake Onna is missing a drop of love, a drop of warmth. He hopes he's not mistaken. He says in secret that true love is only found once, but it's not appreciated until it's lost. He hopes the universe has sent them this chance. Kuchisake Onna tells him to stop the pointless chatter. Jianche turns pale and bites his tongue. He looks away and asks why she doesn't believe him. After all, this is obviously their opportunity to get closer and know love. He clasps his eyes shut and presses a kiss to her lips. She opens her eyes wide with shock. She blushes and tries to break the kiss. She says something inaudible into his mouth. There's a slight blush on her cheeks. He opens his mouth, circling her closed lips. She closes her eyes and blushes thickly. She decides to kiss him back until he stops. Jianche pulled away from her to take a breath of air. Their mouths were connected by a glowing thread. Kuchisake Onna opens her eyes wide with surprise. Taina clenches her thighs and realizes that the guy is really good at tongue work. Jianche turned away from Kuchisake Onna and exhaled. Taina doesn't understand why he stopped kissing her. She covered her flushed face with her hands and called him a bastard. She looks embarrassed and worried. Jianche also blushed and realizes that besides the taste of blood, he also feels some other sweet aftertaste. She bounces off him, escaping his grip under her ribs. He stares at her, not understanding the situation. Kuchisake Onna clamps her eyes shut, clenches her fists, and blushes. She says her name is Xiaolei. She scurries away and screams, turning around that she will surely get revenge on him and he will pay for his deed yet. He doesn't answer anything, but just grins. There's blood smeared on his lips from his kiss with the mystery. He stands among the trees and stares after the fleeing Kuchisake Onna in complete silence. He blushes and smirks, admitting that kissing Kirisake Onna turned out to taste very good. He manages to accomplish a hidden mission by kissing Kuchisake Onna. He is rewarded with a bloody pair of scissors. He's surprised that he got a forbidden item at the beginning, even though it's the lowest level item. But even they are very valuable. A forbidden level F scissors, they are not only suitable for cutting hair. The item was left behind by Kuchisake Onna and cannot be sold. Jianche grins and brings the scissors to his chest flat. Tongues of energy begin to concentrate around them. He slings the scissors on his shoulder and realizes that the spirit of the protagonist lurks within him, and therefore he must not coward. He managed to get to Yellow Springs Hospital. He will have to take care of the patients in the role of a nurse. The time to complete is 7 days. The system tells you that good patient relations will bring extra points, and it is quite safe to sleep at night if you keep your eyes open. John Che enters the lobby of the ruined hospital. He looks around, not seeing any light sources or living beings. The clomping of heels can be heard from behind. John Che turns around to see a girl wearing bright red shoes. The girl is wearing a Frank nurse's outfit and a duty dressing. She looks at the hero in surprise and asks if he is a newcomer. She says John Che is in charge of the 4 patients in room 401. He should come back here at night to get paid. He asks if anyone else has come here besides him. The nurse replies that he will find out while he is working. She chuckles and says that one person died a little earlier. She calls the deceased person garbage. The nurse rolls her eyes and sticks out her tongue and says the deceased was damn tasty. John Che turns pale and looks after the departing nurse. He realizes that someone died at the beginning and was eaten despite being resurrected. John Che opens the doors to the 4th floor. The walls are covered in cracks and the lights are off. There is silence all around. He walks over to the desk of the duty officer and is surprised that there is not a single nurse on duty behind him. He opens the records on his desk and realizes that there are only 8 rooms on this floor, of which only 4 are occupied, which means he has less work to do. He realizes that this mission is level 4 difficulty, which means it should be easy. He decides to go to room 401. He stood in front of room 401. There were bloody handprints and bloodstains on the door of the room. He screws up his face, feeling nauseous, but convinces himself to calm down because it might not be that bad. This ward has very noisy patients, and as soon as he opens the door, a human head will fly at him. It's dangerous for him to lose the respect of the patients. He grins and calls for the scissors. He is amazed at how aptly named this place is, the mysterious world. John Che opens the door to the chamber with his foot. He asks who they are if they are willing to smash someone's head for fun. A head with long black hair and covered in blood flies at him. The head's eyes and mouth are black and empty. John Che nails his head to the ground, piercing it with the scissors that he had increased in size. The lights are on in the ward. A boy and a girl in striped pajamas are sitting on the beds. A headless girl stands right in front of John Che. The fellow patient is pale and frowning, staring at the floor. One of his arms is bare bones. A girl patient looks at her head pierced by scissors. She clutches her teddy bear in her arms. John Che shakes off his hands and wonders why they were called noisy if it's pretty quiet here. The girl frowns and wonders what's wrong with him, since the girl was just joking and he stuck a pair of scissors in her head. The bone-arm guy swallows and frowns, realizing that John Che has unusual strength in scissors. John Che says that he is their nurse, and he is here to help some of them. He asks the person who needs help to stand up. The head at his feet says she's the one who needs help. John Che apologizes and says he'll take out the scissors right away. The system tells him that if he takes the scissors out of her head, she'll eat him alive. The head asks why he's procrastinating and asks him to get the scissors out of her head soon. John Che simply scrolls through the scissors in response. His eyes burn with fury and his mouth is stubbornly clenched. The patients on the beds huddle together and squeal in terror. There's a bloody mess on the floor from the head. John Che grins and asks her for forgiveness. There is blood on his face from the smashed head. He wipes his face with his hand. He has a cruel smile on his face. He says he didn't think her head would be so fragile. Mystery sits on her knees and shrugs, saying she's sad. The system tells him that the patients will now fear him and will not cross him. John Che asks who needs special care. The 3 patients hug each other in terror and squeal that they don't need any more help. John Che asks the headless girl if she wants him to put her head back where it belongs. She says she'll do it herself. A speaker in the corner of the room blares that a nurse is needed in room 402. John Che frowned, looking forward to the extra work. He puts his hands on his hips and decides that after completing the task from the head nurse, he can go straight home. The system doesn't give a clue. John Che smiles and thinks everything will go smoothly. He pulls the handle of the ward door. Darkness greets him in the room. He extends his hand, says hello, and asks who called the nurse. A girl covered in blood rushes at him and screams. She has no face, only various sized cuts in her skin. She puts her arm around his shoulder and points to something behind her. John Che turns pale with horror and asks what happened here. Someone dangles from the ceiling and tells John Che that she says the baby is scared and asks the guy to calm him down. A patient is hanging from the ceiling, suspended by his ankle. He points to a crying infant. John Che asks why they didn't calm him down themselves. The suspended man turns to him with a puzzled look on his face and says that's what the nurses are here for. John Che says he wants to see what will happen if he doesn't do it, because he doesn't have to watch the kids. The system says no one will punish patients who eat the slacking medical staff. John Che decides to tell the baby a story to stop him from crying. The toddler makes a scary face and says that if he doesn't like the story, he will eat him. John Che doesn't react. The toddler frowned and wondered why John Che was so calm. He clenched his fists on his chest. Jianche says she'll tell him a tale about 4 babies with antennas on their heads. The infant doesn't know what he means. The baby opens his mouth full of sharp teeth and says he doesn't like the story, that he's hungry and can't sleep. Jianche puts the bloody scissors under the infant's jaws. There are bloodstains around the infant's mouth, and his eyebrows are frowned. Jianche asks him if his mother taught him not to interrupt those telling stories. The infant is sweating profusely. All the students have gathered in the lobby and are exchanging first impressions of the assignment. Jianche smiles nervously and says that he was forced to tell a story. The other students look at him with incomprehension. The head nurse appears. All the students turn excitedly in her direction. A student with a narrow face and a hunched nose blocks her path and thanks her for her excellent work. Her face contorts with rage. She strikes him viciously on the head with her hand. Blood spatters around him from the blow. The disciple falls to his face and knees, his clothes covered in blood. The others turn pale and sigh in horror. The head nurse calls the students useless creatures, as patients complain about mishandling and unfulfilled tasks. The nurse is handing out brown envelopes to everyone. She says it is their salary based on their success. She also says there are vending machines on all floors with food and water that can be bought with her paycheck. She tells everyone to head to the waiting rooms on their floors, but orders the janitor to follow her to the basement. She turns around with a calm expression on her face and says she's warning everyone one last time. Her face contorts with anger and her eyes light up with evil fire. She says that everyone should sleep at night and not open their eyes, no matter what happens. Jianche received 100 coins, 30 of which he spent on food and water. He notices something unusual about the vending machine. There is a flashlight on the shelf in the vending machine, and for 500 points you can buy it even now. Jianche decides to eat and go to bed, because tomorrow he has to rise at 6:30 in the morning. There is a tower in the middle of the mountains. Jianche stands in front of the high gate to the heavenly prison. He clenched his fists and decides what to do. He opened his eyes wide and tries to remember how many times he's dreamt about this place this month. He wraps his arms around the bars blocking the way to the heavenly prison, and realizes that it is most likely possible to lift it. He lies down under the bars and asks why he is dreaming about this place. But they won't let him inside. He decides to just continue sleeping. In the secret world, he sleeps on a bed with blue sheets and no uniform. He's sniffling, and saliva is dripping from the corner of his mouth. Above his sleeping body, a monster hung in the air. Mystery is wearing a blood-stained medical coat, and a smile stretched across his face. At 6:30 in the morning, all the students gather in the lobby and complain that they were very scared during the night. Jianche notices that there are fewer of them. Suddenly, someone calls out to Jianche. He turns around, answering the call. A girl with a revealing cleavage stands in front of him and asks if he could lend her 50 coins. Mystery cries that the author didn't let her show her face near the prison. The author replies that there's nothing to show because she doesn't even have a head. The girl realizes that something happened to everyone during the night, except for Jianche, and he most likely found some kind of amulet. The girl's name is Li Xiaoxiao, and she asked Jianche for money. She says she only earned 5 coins yesterday, which she spent on water. She presses his hand to her chest and promises to do whatever he wants in exchange for a couple coins. Jianche notices the head nurse and suggests we discuss it later. He realizes that the lantern is worth so much for a reason and that he should save his money. The head nurse says the 5 losers open their eyes during the night. She tells everyone to get to their assignments immediately. Jianche stands in front of room 403 and hesitates to go inside. Today he was told to take the medicine to a patient in room 403. He frowns and hesitates to act. Headless Girl says that the patients who have eaten the most people are in rooms 403 and 404. A man hanging upside down says a patient in room 403 bit off her previous nurse's hand. The system tells you that a cure is only good if you add blood, coffee, and broken glass to it. Jianche stands with a mug that has coffee, jasmine, and glass chips added to it. He realizes that he needs to be even more careful today. He enters the room where a red-haired girl is sitting. He brings a cup of medicine and says that he has brought her order. The coffee cost him 50 coins, and he's glad he didn't have to add his own blood. He sets the cup down in front of the girl with the fangs. The girl takes the cup and tastes the contents of the cup, licking the whipped foam with crushed glass. She opens her eyes wide in surprise. She is blown away by the aroma and taste of the drink that Jianche brought. She wraps both hands around the cup and drinks the contents loudly, tipping her head back. Shards of glass pierce her throat. Jianche clenched his teeth and turned pale at this sight. He doesn't have enough words to describe his attitude. The vampiress rolls her eyes in pleasure and says it was divinely delicious. She says that he managed to please her and holds out the money for him to buy her coffee every day. Jianche is delighted by her generosity. He closes the ward door and walks out into the hallway, clenching the bills the vampiress gave him in his hands. He cries and smiles with happiness. He is glad that the gods have sent him such a generous gift in the form of a rich girl. Jianche wants to buy 2 fries, water, and a pack of cookies, but first of all a flashlight, which he definitely needs. The system says he bought a special item and the flashlight unlocked the special quest Sad Cry of Bloody Night. Jianche chews on his fries and wonders what this special assignment is all about. Li Xiaoxiao with a pale face runs and calls out to Jianche and asks for help. She screams that a monster is chasing her. She screams that she will do whatever he wants. But Jianche slaps her across the face with such force that her bow falls off. Li Xiaoxiao falls to her elbows and knees in front of him. Her red bow bounces off the floor and lies in front of her. Her face is covered in blood and she asks Jianche why he won't help his classmate. Jianche smiles and says that they are not classmates and it's time for the girl to stop pretending. He points his middle finger at her and says he's smart enough to figure out her ruse. Jianche says that a girl should have a mole on her left breast and the creature should be more professional about such little things. Jianche realizes that he has a level 6 mystery in front of him and this is the perfect moment to practice. The creature rips off the girl's face and tells him that he's got him figured out very easily, and that's the only reason he's worthy of being his prey. Jianche stabs into the creature's neck with the scissors that he had increased in size. There is a cruel smile on his lips. Bloodstains spread across the creature's remaining skin. It clenches its teeth and asks him to wait for the onslaught. The hero says that the chattering has gotten a lot of people killed, so it's better to strike before it's too late. He mercilessly attacks next. It was the 6th hour of the evening. The head nurse prepared envelopes to hand out to the students. She hands the 3 envelopes to Jianche and praises him for his excellent work. She tells everyone to go rest. The disciples notice that Jianche has received extra money, and their hearts are filled with envy. Class President Li Jiahao tells everyone to calm down, because they are only at the beginning of the trial and he has an idea. He is concerned that they have only completed 2 days but have already lost most of their students, so he would like to discuss the situation with them. He says they need to work together to preserve their lives and gain money, fame, and power. He says he got a katana that can hurt the mysteries and he offers to pool money to get the lantern. Jianche realizes that the president wants to gain primacy in the matter of survival. But working together does not interest the hero. Jianche says goodbye to the president. He calls out to him, asking him to think about helping each other. President Li Jiahao shouts for him to go up to the 7th floor to him in case of danger. Jianche promises that he will think about it. Jianche sits on his bunk and studies the system's prompts. He reads about the secret mission Sad Cry of the Bloody Night. The task involves a flashlight and literally encourages the hero to leave the room in the middle of the night in search of clues. Even though the nurse told him not to open his eyes at night, he has forbidden objects and clues, so there's no point in being afraid. If he completes the main task, he will get a place among the best despite his low scores in the exam, and many prospects will open up for him. Although there is an option of teamwork, that is not the path Jianche wants to take. Besides, the president is not a good person. Jianche decides to take a nap and see what happens at night. It's 10 o'clock in the evening. Jianche slowly opens his eyes after waking up from a short nap. He yawns and frowns his eyebrows. Jianche sits up and rubs his eyes, glad he didn't fall asleep. But suddenly he notices that something is wrong. He turns pale and frowns in confusion. He realizes he's in a hospital room. Jianche wakes up in an unknown place. His surroundings are in shambles. He opens his eyes wide and realizes that this is the true face of the hospital. He decides to turn on the flashlight. A countdown from 3 o'clock immediately appears above the object. Jianche had a feeling that this time things would be more dangerous than he thought. He goes to the door and there is someone knocking loudly on the back side. He realizes that there is someone on the back side. He peers through the peephole of the door with one eye squeezed shut. An eye with a very narrow pupil stares back at him. Suddenly, people on the other side start banging frantically, begging Jianche to let them in because they were being chased. The knocking continues at the door. The voice of the person shouting sounds like Luo Mengwei. Jianche pleads for help, for someone is approaching. Jianche realizes that he can't open the door because he doesn't know who's there. Jianche realizes that he can't open the door because he doesn't know who's there. Behind the door is a mystery with many heads growing out of its back. The monster asks to be let in. The head on the monster's back screams that it hates Jianche and wishes him an agonizing death. A pool of blood spreads out from under the door. Jianche decides that the problem has run its course. Suddenly, a voice from behind Jianche asks why he didn't save him. The hero turns pale and blinks his eyes in fear. He turns around and shines his flashlight at the creature. Jianche doesn't understand how the mystery crept into the chamber. The lantern light dissolves the mystery. She screams that they have studied together for 3 years and must die together. All that remains of the mystery is a withered hand. Jianche tries to cover himself with the bad smoke from the remains. Jianche is glad that the monster is gone and that he had a flashlight with him. The ghost could have entered directly, but decided to knock on the door theatrically. A shriek is heard from afar. Jianche realized that it was a woman screaming. The system tells you that the Sad Cry of Bloody Night quest is 10% complete. A higher difficulty means a higher reward for completing the task. Jianche needs to find the screaming woman. From the sound of it, the woman is far away, and the flashlight will last just under 3 hours. The system gives no clues, so he decides to act. He tucks himself back into bed and smiles. He decided to get plenty of sleep before tomorrow. Jianche tells the vampirist that someone was disturbing the students with loud screaming and crying. He asks what it could be. The vampirist frowns in response to his words and wrinkles her nose. She replies that it's better for Jianche to ignore such oddities. The hero doesn't understand why. The vampirist says otherwise they'll all be finished off by the head nurse and tells him to stay out of it. Her hands clench on his shoulders and shake violently. Jianche turns pale and frowns. He closes the door to the vampire's room and realizes that the assignment has to do with the head nurse. He decides to head out later to look for clues. Jianche remembers that today he has to find a patient from room 404 on the 8th floor. A figure creeps up from behind. Jianche snatches the bloody scissors and turns around, preparing to fight. Otto turns out to be Jianche's classmate and yells for Brother Che to forgive him. The hero apologizes for his reaction to Afu. Afu asks if Jianche is going to the 8th floor. He had worked on the 8th floor earlier and lost Xiao Jun there. After he was resurrected, he said that he was met by a mystery and asked to choose red or white paper. Jianche interrogates what Afu is talking about. Afu puts his palms together and says he knows Brother Che won't work with him, but he hoped that Jianche could fulfill one request of his. Jianche smiles and says that he believes Afu and will do his best. Jianche is sitting on the toilet lid. The system asks why he came here. Jianche says this is not a reality TV show. Under the door, red, yellow, and white-colored cards suddenly appear. Jianche doesn't realize what's happening. A hand reaches under the door up to the wrist, and a voice turns to the stall visitor ready to voice a question. Jianche kicks the door with his foot, hitting the patient in the head, and yells that he won't choose red, white, or yellow paper. The patient crawls away from the door and is upset that he wasn't allowed to finish his sentence. Jianche calls for a pair of scissors. The guy stabs the patient with scissors and demands Xiao Jun's life back, or pay for cremation. The patient apologizes and promises to pay. The patient's blood-covered hand clutches the bills, which he holds out to Jianche and asks him to let him go. The patient says that Jianche's friend is lucky to have him. The hero replies that he doesn't even know Xiao Jun and counts the money. The patient wipes himself from his own blood, but freezes with incomprehension and annoyance upon hearing Jianche's words. Jianche grabs the patient by the hair and asks if he knows where the patient from room 404 is. The patient replies that he is in the women's restroom across the hall and asks to be released. There's a patient with a scar on his head sitting in a cubicle. Jianche's task today is to find the patient in room 404. The system suggests that an accomplished man has no better company than alcohol. The patient tells Jianche not to stop him from reading. Jianche points his thumb to the exit and invites the patient to drink Mao Tai, a strong alcoholic beverage, together. There is trash, magazines, and dirty laundry scattered on the floor of the office. Insects are flying around. The patient sighs contentedly, clutching the bottle of Mao Tai in his hands. He wipes the edge of his mouth with the back of his fist, chugging the pills. Jianche asks if the patient knows whose crying is heard in the hospital in the middle of the night. The patient is drinking Mao Tai for antibiotics. The patient warily asks why Jianche is interested. He says he's just curious and hints at a couple more bottles. The patient warns that if Jianche continues to be interested in this, the head nurse will definitely kill him. The patient agrees to tell. Jianche opens his eyes wide, absorbed in interest. A patient tells him to go up to the roof of the hospital and look. The sky above the hospital is colored blood brown. Tina says that if she had a head, she'd want to chug the antibiotic Mao Tai too. Jianche finds himself on the roof of the hospital and walks to the edge. He looks up at the red-brown sky ahead. His eyes are wide open and he wonders if he got the restroom patient right. He frowns and sticks out his lips in displeasure. He thinks it's an unremarkable hospital roof. He wonders why the sky is red and whether the hospital is the whole secret world or just part of it, and how that world works. Jianche decides to focus on looking for clues. He decides to try to search at night if he can't find it during the day. Suddenly something catches his eye. He raises his eyebrows in surprise. Something in the recess of the roof reflected light and glittered. Jianche wondered what it could be. He goes downstairs and discovers a cell phone. He notices that the phone is rather cheap, but picks it up. The system updates the sad cry of bloody night job information and alerts you that progress is 50%. Jianche smiles contentedly, realizing that the phone is a key item and he is very lucky. The system tells you that the secret is lurking in the shadows, but when you start prying into the secrets of others, people will start prying into you. Suddenly, Jianche feels a strong aura of a creature stronger than the 6th level with his back. He realizes that he can only handle creatures below level 6, and those who are even slightly stronger, he cannot. The head nurse comes up to him and asks what he is doing here. She has a displeased look on her face. Jianche awkwardly scratches the back of his head, says hello, and says he just decided to go out for some fresh air. The nurse looks down at him unhappily and asks if he has decided to ignore her assignments. Jianche says he found the right patient, but his room smelled so bad that he wanted to air out. Jianche knows that if she doesn't believe him, she will finish him off on the spot. He calls for the scissors and hopes that everything will go smoothly. The head nurse gives Jianche a piercing look. She tells him to get the hell out of here and complete his tasks. At 6 o'clock in the evening, the students get together and discuss that the headman has just embezzled their money. Jianche is only paid 50 points. The class president says that he was just lucky with his earnings last time. Jianche regretted that he himself hadn't thought of just taking the other disciples' money. Jianche sits on the bed and tries to turn on his phone by pressing the activation button. The rays of the sun come through the window. Jianche remembers that the secret is lurking in the shadows and decides he should try using the phone at night. At 8:30 in the evening, the phone works. Jianche is happy that he got the clue right. On his phone, Jianche finds just one video 13 seconds long. He decides to watch it. The phone screen lights up with an image of Jianche himself sitting on the bed with the phone. Suddenly, Jianche on the recording turns around with a creepy smile and wide-open eyes. Jianche turns pale and grits his teeth in fear. He recognizes himself in the video. Suddenly, his doppelganger in the video pulls out a knife and holds it up to his face. He has a permanent creepy smile on his face. Jianche, holding the phone, discovers a cut on his cheek. He realizes that what is happening in the video is happening to him right now. Suddenly, the evil doppelganger from the video brings a knife over his throat, about to stab him. Jianche asks him not to do it, but realizes there's nothing he can do to prevent it. He recalls the system's hint that flashlight light can banish darkness and cast out shadows. Jianche points the flashlight's light directly at the phone screen in his hand. He grits his teeth, not wasting a moment. The entity in the phone starts squealing and fuming. She asks him to turn off the flashlight and stop. The phone falls on the bed, still smoking. Jianche is glad he has a flashlight, otherwise he would be dead by now. The phone is the key item, but it is also a danger in its own right. Another video, now 27 seconds long, is shown on the screen. The video shows someone holding a girl's hand. She asks to let go, but the person holding her asks her to stay. Holder laughs and says he loves that she's so willful and strong. The girl turns around and hits the man with her hand. She demands that he let her go. The man holds her by the neck and asks why she wants to drink some stuff, even though he's being so nice to her. A girl in red underwear appears in the video. Jianche recognizes the mole next to her mouth and realizes that the video is of a head nurse. The headless mystery opens her arms and asks for a hug. Jianche realizes that the girl in the video is the head nurse when she was young. But he wants to find out who was holding her back. The video ends, but the progress of the task has not increased. Jianche realizes that he has overlooked something. He rewatches the video over and over again, rewinding the video's progress backwards, listening and peering for clues. He finally finds the clue he needs at the 17th second. He sees a sign with the room number, 1401. The progress of the Sad Cry of the Bloody Night quest is 60%. Jianche rejoices that he is getting closer and closer to figuring it out. The cold white light of the flashlight hits the closed door that leads to the 14th floor. Jianche doused himself with sweat and panted as he climbed the stairs. He wanted to take the elevator, but the system told him it could be dangerous. He reaches the 14th floor and looks at the number. He hopes that the 1401st ward is here. He reaches for the door, pushing it open, but suddenly the air is punctuated by the clatter of heels on tile. Jianche leans against the wall and listens, peering through the gap in the door. The sound of heels resounds in a measured and tinkling manner. Jianche sees the figure of a nurse who looks like an older nurse with a knife in her hand. A blood-covered figure approaches, and Jianche realizes that it is an ordinary nurse. The nurse stops in front of the floor entrance and starts looking around. Jianche exhales in relief, realizing that he was not noticed. He fidgets, trying to remember if there was another nurse in the hospital. But a voice interrupts his thoughts, calling him brother. Two entities approach him and call him brother, offering to play with him. One clings to his leg, and the other flies at his head. The entity hugs his head and reaches out to him, begging him to play with them. The mystery has many eyes, containing many different pupils. Jianche directs the bright light of the flashlight into his face. Tears of pain flowed down his face, but the entities dissolved into thin air. The black entities turn into a thin haze and disappear. Jianche cries and says that he was very scared and didn't realize what it was. Suddenly, the clomping of heels sounds right behind Jianche's back. The nurse says contentedly that she has finally found the sneaky insect. Jianche points a flashlight at the nurse. He squeals that it's not fair to scare him like this time after time. The nurse falls to her knees and drops the knife and bonnet. Jianche turns pale and realizes that the flashlight has no effect on her. The nurse quickly crawls up the stairs after him. A frightened Jianche asks why they like to chase people so much. The nurse stands up and draws her knife. She throws it at Jianche's head, cutting off a few strands, but he ducks just in time. He reaches the top floor and realizes that the only thing left to do is to take his chances. He takes the flashlight in his teeth and slides across the floor, feet first. He kicks himself out the door by the roof, somersaulting forward and stopping in a sitting position. He gets up to see that the nurse has already caught up with him. She crawls toward the door. The nurse stops in the passageway and can't make it to the roof. Jianche sighs in relief. Jianche gritted his teeth. He was glad that his intuition had not failed him, because it would be impossible to run away from such a fast creature all the time. The clue was fear. The patients were afraid to cry, and it affected the nursing staff. Jianche realizes that the source of the crying was on the roof. Suddenly, someone asks Jianche who he is. Jianche excitedly turns around to see the source of the question. A little girl stands in front of him and cries. The system tells us that all children want to do is eat yummy food, play, and socialize. Jianche turns his attention to the girl's emaciated legs. He presses his lips together in annoyance. He leans over to the girl and strokes her head. He asks if the girl's name is really Xiao and says it is a very pretty name. Jianche says he came to the roof to play with her. The girl is overjoyed and stops crying. They return together to the 14th floor. A lollipop on a stick falls out of the food and drink machine. Jianche holds out a lollipop to the girl, whose arms are full of goodies, and asks if she is satisfied. The girl smiles happily in response. He invites her to keep him company. The girl says that she is ready to go anywhere with her big brother. Jianche thinks the girl is very kind and innocent. He doesn't know where her mom is now, because the girl doesn't even have shoes on. He leads the girl by the hand and lights the way with a flashlight. He realizes that as long as Xiao is with him, the nurse won't show up. Jianche decides to find room 1401. He approaches the door, his shadow lying on it, illuminated by the flashlight. He slowly opens the creaking door and peeks through the resulting gap. Jianche suddenly stops and clenches his fist. The girl crashes into his back and yells. She takes out a lollipop from her mouth and puzzledly asks Jianche what happened and why they stopped. Jianche quickly covers the girl's eyes with the palm of her hand and shouts for her not to look inside. There is horror on Jianche's face. He doesn't understand how something so dirty could have happened here. The headless mystery wishes everyone good luck and asks to always be on the lookout. A man hangs from a huge wooden cross. His arms, legs, and neck are tied to the tree with barbed wire. He lifts his head and wheezes in pain. Jianche rounds his eyes at the sight. He thought it was horrible. The man is approached by the same nurse he met in the hallway. She is holding a knife at the ready. The nurse stabs the man's throat, and drops of blood roll down the blade. He apologizes, but his words are cut short by his own cry of pain. Jianche doesn't understand how this can happen in a hospital. The girl asks what's going on. There are pools of blood on the floor, and the man's skin is peeled off like rags. Jianche starts to feel nauseous, but he doesn't want Xiao to see this sight. The man looks at Jianche and asks for help. The veins on his face are swollen, but the guy doesn't answer him. The man screams with all his might for Jianche to help him, but the nurse stops his screaming with a deft cut of the knife. The man's tongue from the cross spits on the floor. Jianche pressed his lips together in horror at what he saw. The nurse holds the knife at the ready, but the man remains silent. Jianche suggests that the man might have died from such torture. Jianche turns pale. The man starts begging to be released again. He says he admits his guilt. Jianche's eyes bulge, and he doesn't understand how this is possible, since he just had his tongue cut off. The whole scene started all over again. It's like an endless loop of suffering. The man on the cross says he will not do it again. The nurse, with a creepy grin on her face, moves on the man again, drawing her knife. She chuckles contentedly. Blood stains recover the walls and floor. The man screams for her to stop, that he won't do it anymore and that he was wrong. Xiao touches the hand covering her eyes and asks, "Go back, for she is getting sick." Jianche agrees, but asks her to keep her eyes closed. He starts to gradually move away from room 1401. Jianche leads the girl back to the roof of the hospital. Xiao walks forward, covering her eyes with her palms. She asks Jianche if she can open her eyes. He replies that she can open her eyes now. He holds out a huge, multicolored heart-shaped lollipop on a stick. The girl's eyes light up and asks if it's hers. Jianche replies that the lollipop is hers and asks if she likes it. She cradles the lollipop in her hand and says, glowing with happiness, that she likes it a lot. Jianche smiles at her, resting her hands on her knees. Suddenly, the girl shifts an excited look to Jianche and asks if he's coming to play with her again. Jianche strokes her head and replies that he will definitely visit her again. The girl smiles contentedly at him. The sad cry of Bloody Night task has progressed to 70%. Jianche realizes that he still has a little more time to complete it. Those who pass the special assignment will be given recommendations and a cash reward of 1 million. Although Jianche has entered a new world, his past remains the same, and he remembers his sister pleasing him with lollipops as a child. He decides to complete the task at all costs so that his sister will not deny herself anything else. Suddenly, the class president appears on the stairs with a flashlight. He calls out to Jianche. The guy realizes that Li Jiahao was able to save up 500 coins for a flashlight and also got a special assignment. The president realizes that John Che got there first and they got the same clue. He says not to stand in his way. John Che says he wouldn't recommend going there, but he basically doesn't care if he dies. Without Xiao, going to the 14th floor is suicide. Li Jiahao shouts that he can do just as well as John Che, and that he shouldn't even think of getting the reward alone. At 6:30 in the morning, one of the students screams that you couldn't give patients a forced injection and calls everyone an idiot. The students say the complexity of the assignment was higher than expected, and they didn't know how to proceed as they got here for the first time. The apprentice says the patients killed 13 people, and that's insane for the supposed level of difficulty. 13 people died after Ying Yao signed a contract with a spirit. Each of the 13 had a different spirit contract. The apprentice decides to leave the secret world, even though he has resurrection. The pain is very real. He doesn't want to be noticed before he dies. 2 other female students also decide to finish the assignment without completing it. Today's assignment seems to have made many people give up. John Che ponders why a few others decided to stay. He shifts his gaze to them. He sees Li Jiahao, who managed to come back from the 14th floor. He is amazed and guesses that there was a hidden boss. The class president points a bandaged hand at the other students and asks if they have any more resurrection points. They avert their eyes, unwilling to answer the question. There is a heavy silence. John Che gawks in surprise and asks why they have such a reaction and if they had already died. Li Jiahao replies that he was killed by a nurse yesterday after reaching the 14th floor. Li Xiao says the ceiling collapsed on her yesterday when she was doing some cleaning. And Fu averts his gaze and says he was crushed to death by a closet yesterday. John Xiao asks why they are still here after all, without the resurrection goggles. If they die again, it will be the final death. Li Xiao replies that if they still manage to complete the task, they will enter Qingdao University. She grits her teeth and says that after the mysteries set her up, her fighting spirit has only gotten stronger and she's not about to give up. She says that she only has 2 paths, Qingdao University or Qingming University. She's ready to show them all what she's worth. The old patient throws his head back in ecstasy. Saliva flows from his mouth and his cheeks blush. His bare ass is raised up. Jian Che sighs in relief that he's finally done. He rolls a cart with a pile of used syringes. The patient says that one is rude. Jian Che smiles, as the patients were well-behaved and not troublesome. A patient hugs a bottle of alcohol and anticipates the fun. Jian Che closes the door behind him. He wonders how the others are doing. Someone in the hallway catches his eye. He's curious as to what he's doing here. Li Jiahao stands in the hallway, leaning against the wall. Jian Che calls out to him. At that moment, a can of Coke falls out of the red machine. Jian Che takes a Coke. The class president wants to ask him for help with the assignment. Jian Che refuses to risk her life for him because he is very erratic, and his behavior does not please Jian Che. Li Jiahao bows deeply and asks for forgiveness. The suddenness of his actions makes Jian Che recoil. The president apologizes for earlier. He says the assignment is very important to him. Jian Che doesn't understand how this concerns him. Besides, he has nothing to apologize to him since he didn't give him his coins. Li Jiahao straightens up and apologizes for disturbing Jian Che. The president says he met a patient who knew the head nurse. She was in charge of Ward 1401, and that's why he went to the 14th floor, but he didn't think he would die there. The patient had advised him to go to the head nurse's room, but Li Jiahao had lost that opportunity along with the resurrection goggles. Jian Che puts his arm around his shoulders and asks him to repeat his words. Li Jiahao is shocked at the sudden change in his mood. Jian Che says he can't leave his classmate in trouble, and even took revenge on Xiao Jun yesterday, and tells him to ask Ah Fu. Someone is sitting in front of the TV with a cartoon about a sea sponge and a star. There's a slurping sound. There is a patient sitting on the bed. He is of enormous size, surrounded by food and garbage from it. He wants to call the head nurse to have his bed changed. Suddenly, the door to the ward falls to the floor. A strip of glass in it shatters. The patient stares at the newcomers in incomprehension. Jian Che's patients are standing in the doorway. An old man has a syringe slung over his shoulders. The fat man raises an eyebrow in incomprehension and asks what they are doing. The old man points a syringe needle in his direction and asks him if he is the one who abused his younger brother. The fat man tries to chase them away, but the crowd rushes into the room and grabs him to give him a shot. A scream is heard. Li Jiahao realizes that these were level 5 secrets and is shocked that Jian Che can command them. That one reminds him about the nurse's room. According to Jiahao, the head nurse usually rests on the 4th floor. Jian Che stands in front of the only elevator that leads there. A chime sounds and the elevator doors part. Jian Che steps inside. Jian Che presses onto the underground 4th floor. Next to him in the elevator is a pink-haired patient. The elevator moves downward. The girl asks if the man is heading to the morgue. Jian Che confirms that he is. She replies that the morgue is not really a place for the living. The girl thinks he has taken a hallucinogenic, as even she is afraid of the ghosts of the morgue. even though she's not even human. The girl says the hospital is more than a few hundred years old, and in addition to patients, the hospital accepts dead bodies in its morgue. In the morgue, there are rows of beds with bodies covered with bloody sheets. The morgue holds corpses that have not been identified. Perhaps since there is mortal boredom there, corpses like to stroll outside and disappear. Jianche asks if he misheard about the walking dead. The girl giggles and says that she thinks it's weird. To mark the dead, the head nurse hangs a red plaque on their arm. The girl smiles a wide smile and says that she usually has such a sign on her arm as well. She pouts her lips and stares at her empty wrist. The patient frowns her eyebrows. She grabs her head and squeals in search of her ID bracelet. Jianche picks up a red bracelet with the number 117 on it. He asks if this is the bracelet the girl is looking for. The patient suddenly snatches the red bracelet from his hand. She doesn't understand when he managed to steal it. The doors open with a clang. The patient realizes they are on the minus floor. She says it's not good. The girl presses the elevator buttons, trying to close the door as soon as possible. Jianche asks why she's so excited. The girl quickly clicks on the button to close the elevator door. She grumbles that the door is always stuck and it's time someone fixed it. The shuffling of feet on tiles is heard. Jianche boldly sticks his head out of the elevator. The girl hides behind the edge of the elevator and peeks out fearfully. A lone figure of a patient drags his feet along the long corridor. His clothes are covered with heels of blood. Suddenly, the patient turns around. His right cheek is missing, exposing his teeth, and his brains are tumbling out of his open skull. He runs towards the elevator in quick spurts, flailing his limbs in different directions. The girl keeps hitting the door close button and praying to the gods in mercy. The patient screams fearfully that the patient is already near. He runs as fast as he can to the elevator. She accelerates to press the door closing button. The elevator doors start to close, but Jianche holds it out with his hand. He looks angrily at the girl and asks what she was doing. The patient is confused and continues to stare at him intently. Jianche says that the patient obviously also wanted to use the elevator, because he is in a hurry to go somewhere. The patient does not understand why this talk of conscience, for the patient is a ghost. The elevator doors close and the trio begins to go upstairs. Jianche decides to ask the patient with brains outward how he washes his hair. The elevator stops at the second lowest floor. A patient whose intestines have fallen out of his body crawls up to the elevator. He asks to be let inside. Jianche decides to ask him how he takes his bath. After a moment, the elevator descends to the floor below. Jianche helps the old woman go inside, and she is already thinking about how to steal his body. The old lady says she is very grateful for the kindness. Her mouth is drooling. Her jaw flies out of her mouth in surprise. Jianche asks the old lady where she bought her dentures. The pink-haired patient gets angry and decides she's had enough. Her neck opens, revealing rows of sharp teeth. She decides to eat Jianche right now. The patient with brains outwardly asks her to give Jianche to him. The wheelchair patient appeals to their conscience and asks them to give Jianche to him. The old lady slaps him on the back of the head and tells him that elders should defer to them. They start fighting and swearing over Jianche. The elevator reaches the fourth bottom floor. The patient clutches the patient's open brain with her hand, but suddenly calls out to everyone. The door to the elevator turns out to be open. Jianche slipped away while they were fighting over his body. Jianche lightly left the elevator without attracting attention. Mysteries are very selfish creatures, and if more predators than meat are around, they fight each other. Jianche was ready for battle, but they seemed very foolish to him. The hero enters the morgue. The system informs him that in such a quiet place you will meet neither scornful looks nor harsh voices. Jianche walks past the tables and recognizes the corpses as his dead classmates. His attention is drawn to a notebook and notes on a table against the wall. He opens his notebook and examines the pieces of paper. It turns out to be a head nurse's diary. She describes her first day on the job during her internship. A little later, Qing was admitted to the hospital, and the nurse took a great liking to him. The progress of the Sad Cry a Bloody Night quest increases to 90%. A nurse writes that her teacher praised her and she wants to be like him. His face is sketched on the photo. The teacher began to bully the nurse, but no one came to her aid, but instead judged her. She wanted everyone to know who he was. She promised to torture him forever and killed the entire staff. Jianche closes the book and realizes that he didn't think there was such a dark story behind this assignment. The system reports the mission is 99% complete. Jianche doesn't understand why it was 1% short of completion. The system alerts that the covert mission is temporarily changing to nightmare mode. A 50-year-old killer will show up at night. The students frown excitedly. A killer round is coming. Jianche laughs, pleased with this development. The hero knows that nightmare mode happens once every 100 years and he is lucky enough to participate. In nightmare mode, the rewards are more generous. The task, the sad cry of the bloody night, is changed to the last survivor. Jianche was upset that the task he had completed 99% had been replaced by another. The nurse catches Jianche with her diary in hand and asks what he's doing here. The head nurse caught Jianche reading her diary. He snaps out of his seat and quickly runs away without explaining himself. The nurse listens to him running away but didn't bother to stop him. Holding back his emasculations, Jianche walks up to the first floor. His classmates excitedly rush into the elevator, worried about him. Jianche looks at them in surprise, recognizing his friend Afu. All four of them are standing in front of a table in the lobby. Jianche asks why they are here. Li Xiao says they were told he went to the morgue and everyone was worried about him. They don't know what to do. Jianche says he met the head nurse there, but she didn't attack him. He says it is dangerous for them to participate in a nightmare regime and suggests they give up. Li Jiahao doesn't know what he should do in this situation. He says that if they succeed in the task, the reward will be greater. And Fu is horrified by his idea, because nightmare mode for newcomers is guaranteed death. Li Jiahao says that he simply has no other choice. He took their coins and should compensate them all upon his return. Li Xiao is touched, and Fu decides to leave the secret world, because his life is more important to him. After just a moment, he disappears, wishing good luck to Brother Qi. Jianche says that they only have one life and they won't get a second chance. Suddenly, his face contorts in disgust. He looks down. Li Jiahao and Li Xiao hugged his legs and called him their leader. He tells them to stop, but they look at him pitifully. Jianche agrees, but tells them to blame themselves in any outcome. The steady ticking of the clock in the morgue. The head nurse waited years for a nightmare regimen. It was the head nurse who was the killer 50 years ago. The system says the killer will come for the contestants at midnight. The wooden clock reads 5 minutes to midnight. A ticking sound echoes over the empty and ruined floor. 1 minute to midnight. The steady ticking fills the air. The clock strikes midnight, taking the students by surprise. Li Jiahao says that together they have a chance to survive. There is a loud knock on the door. All three of them turn around with horror on their faces. The head nurse demands that the door be opened for her. She says everyone should be in their rooms separately at night. The veins on the head nurse's face swell with rage, for the students won't open the door for her. She clenches her teeth. Sharp and crooked spikes grow out of her back. In one hand she holds a knife and the other grows, taking on an inhuman form. With a sweep of her huge hand, she smashes the door to splinters. Her face resembles a mask. She greets me with a predatory smile. She straightens up and assumes her usual form. She wants to get started soon. Li Jiahao was not confused, and suggested that the others run away. He promises to detain the head nurse. Li Xiao looks at him fearfully. She can feel the confidence in his words. Li Jiahao tells them to run away before he changes his mind. Jianche shouts for Xiao Li to follow him faster. She worries what will happen to the president without their help. Suddenly her legs are cut below the knee by something. It turns out to be the president who decided to run away, leaving her behind. He looks at her regretfully, but continues to run forward. The shadow of the head nurse catches up with Li Xiao. Blood drips from the knife in his hand. The pale girl pulls her hand forward, calling out to Li Jiahao. The headless mystery advises against risking your life if you can avoid it. Li Jiahao runs away, leaving Li Xiao to the head nurse. Jianche runs ahead but decides to look back. The class president whizzes past him. Li Xiao remembers how nice the president was to her and doesn't understand his act. Jianche shouts for her to get out of this world faster. Li Xiao is already reaching for the right button to exit. The head nurse mercilessly stabs her in the back. She continues to throw punches, and Jianche decides to run away. After finishing the student, the head nurse picks up the bloody knife. She has her apprentice's blood on her cheek and her lips are tightly closed. She turns her attention in the direction of the fleeing students. Li Jiahao and Jianche reach the 14th floor out of breath. The president says not to judge him, because it's every man for himself. He says he wants to do whatever it takes to cure his father who has cancer, and he has no choice or other option. He says this trial is his only chance to save his father's chance. Jianche tries to catch his breath from climbing the stairs. Jianche says that the ladder may not explain anything to him, but he should stop making himself the most unfortunate victim. Li Xiao wanted to call them over for dinner, telling them about her family. Li Jiahao is shocked by this information. At what he hears, he grits his teeth and turns away. Li Xiao wanted to help Li Jiahao, after all. He had become her friend during this time. It's every man for himself, making his own choices and facing the consequences. Jianche decides that this situation doesn't concern him. He opens the door to the roof and says he's on his own. The white-haired girl turns to the hero who has arrived. She rushes to him with a hug, happy that he has come to play with her. Jianche decides to tell the girl something. Li Jiahao doesn't realize who the girl is. Behind them, they hear the shuffle of shoes on concrete. They turn around. The head nurse says she knew they were coming here. Students will recognize the aura of the 4th-level mystery. There's no way they can defeat such a strong opponent. Plus, it's forbidden by the rules of the mission. Jianche says they have nowhere to run. He asks to hear his story before they are killed. The head nurse stiffens in confusion. Jian tells about a girl who really wanted to become a nurse. The girl grew up and put a lot of effort into reaching her goal. She loved her job, and her patients loved her. But one day she encountered something terrible. Her teacher harassed his patient right in the hospital. She tried to stop him to protect the patient. But at that moment, the teacher decided to show his true colors. He tied up and raped both girls. The teacher helped promote her to shut her up. Everyone around her thought she slept with him for that. Jian Che says that the protagonist of the story is in front of them. The same girl turns out to be Huang Quan, the head nurse of the hospital. Headless Shadow offers Li Xiao a snack. After that incident, her colleagues distance themselves from her, and her patients stop trusting her. At this point, the head nurse smirks. She says she killed them all because they deserved it. Jian Che decides to support her and says that she's right. The nurse looks at him in bewilderment. He thinks they deserved this outcome. He says that deep down she remains a good person. He says this little girl is proof of that. The head nurse of the hospital, always responsible. A ghostly nurse from the 14th floor, blinded by rage. A little girl crying on the roof and waiting for someone. They all turned out to be parts of the head nurse's personality. Jian Che thought the girl was her daughter at first, but then he realized that the ghosts were afraid of the kind and innocent child for a reason. She left all the goodness in the girl and locked her up on the roof. The head nurse says he's right, but she'll keep her opinion because no one helped her in her time of need. She says it's too late for sympathy and pity in her direction now. She says she's going to end it now and kill them. Jian Che says he has a hostage, so they'd better make a deal. If the little girl gets hurt, it will affect her. Suddenly, the sound of flesh being cut is heard, and a splash of blood flies towards Jian Che. Li Jiahao stands with a bloody sword behind the girl who is settled on the ground. He has a cruel smile on his face. He begins to laugh. He decided that the prize was now his. He thanks Jian Che, but suddenly a cut appears on his neck. Li Jiahao's head begins to pitch forward. She falls and rolls on the concrete of the roof. His body falls to his knees, and his last thought is why the nurse isn't dead. The head nurse is surprised that they thought something like that could kill her. She wields the knife and says she's tired of playing games like this. Jian Che grits his teeth and waits for the punch. The little girl asks her to stop, standing up for Jian Che. The girl says those people deserve their fate, but it's time for her to move on. The nurse cries out that not all darkness needs light, and not all sinners need redemption. The girl is crying, for she is talking about herself and the nurse now. Everyone involved in that story paid their price. All this time the nurse was unhappy. The girl says she was unhappy because they are one. He realizes that the girl has been kept here for years. The nurse thought it would make her happy, but it only got worse. The girl had been waiting all this time for the nurse to come to her on the roof. The girl hugs the nurse and says she doesn't want to see her suffer. She cries and offers to rest properly. The girl begins to dissolve into thin air. The nurse cries and realizes that she has been miserable all this time. Jian Che is relieved to be settling down on the roof. He's glad that the plan basically worked. Happiness and sadness come on their own, but only man can give himself redemption. The head nurse cries and forgives herself for her actions. Bright rays permeate everything around her. She begins to dissolve into thin air. The system notifies the end of the task and alerts that participants will be moved to the real world. Jian Che was glad that this was finally over. The system reminds him that there are rewards waiting for him for completing the task. Jian Che remembers something and reaches into the inside pocket of his jacket. He pulls out the sneakers he wanted to give to the barefoot girl from the rooftop, but apparently that was their last encounter. Jian Che would receive the highest score, his level raised to first, his physical strength increased by 55 units. He receives several items as rewards, including a funerary urn from which items can be obtained to complete quests. Xiao Xiao's medical suitcase with bandages, heart pills, tranquilizers, styptics, a special blood-colored uniform worn to pretend to be a secret. Jian Che is pleased with the quantity and quality of the awards. The system alert returns him to the real world. Suddenly, the system alerts you to unexpected interference. Jian Che frowns in displeasure and not understanding what happened. His fingers start to disappear. He yells that the textbooks didn't have information about interference. The system is moving him into unknown space. Next to the device for traveling to the secret world is a counter of participants in the secret world. 2 students remain seated in the classroom. Headmaster Tianqing asks the students if they are sure that the assignment has changed to nightmare mode. Ah Fu replies that that's what happened. The only ones left are Jian Che, Li Xiao, and Li Jiahao. He wouldn't have gotten out if the nightmare mode hadn't started. The director turns his attention to the remaining green cell on the meter. There is only one person in the secret world. Ah Fu believes the one left behind is Jian Che. Another student calls him a fool if he thought the lazy Jian Che was left alive and the president was dead. The irritated principal couldn't stand it and slapped his hand on the table. He says not many manage to survive the nightmare regime, and whoever survives will be the pride of the school. The teacher asks why the student didn't come out if the assignment is over. The pink-haired student mumbles about Jian Che and the nightmare regime. Jian Che finds himself in front of the heavenly prison. He's surprised that it wasn't a dream. He doesn't understand why he was moved here. Suddenly the grate lifts, clearing a passage inside. Jian Che looks inside and hopes it doesn't turn out to be a trap. The system welcomes subordinate Jian Che into the heavenly prison. Jian Che doesn't understand why he was called a subordinate. Suddenly yellow-green streams of magic surround him. He realizes that he feels every nook and cranny in this prison. Everything in the prison is under his control. He frowns and grudgingly points out that this doesn't hide one fact. He says this prison is awfully dirty. In the deafening silence of the prison, he hears a rustle of some sort. This rustling comes from the upper tiers. He pushes aside the chains hanging in the way, climbing up to the right floor. His gaze is drawn to something on the floor. His cheeks redden. He sees a woman's graceful legs shackled together. His cheeks redden and he looks up cheerfully. The ghost of a headless girl in a red dress stands before him. There's an open wound in her neck where her head was. Jianche is disappointed but says it was to be expected. The headless dark spirit Xiaoman lives in cell number 1. His sympathy level is 0. Increasing her sympathy level will allow the hero to better control her and allow her to gain some of her abilities. Jianche doesn't understand the level of this secret, but the pressure of her aura is the same as the head nurse. Jianche offers Xiaoman a snack, but the feeling of pressure from her only increases. Jianche offers her a drink, talks to her, tells her a scary story, asks her what her romantic preferences are. Suddenly a great idea pops into his head. He suggests that she go for a walk. Ghost didn't expect this, but he's thrilled with the idea. The girl jingles her shackles, stepping closer. The system tells me that someone stole her head, beautiful as a stargazing painting. The sympathy level went up 5 units. Jianche says that if she is obedient, he will help her find her head. Jianche thinks he's trapped in a dating simulator. The girl says he's too cocky if he voices such thoughts. She calls him insignificant and easily creates chains out of ice. But suddenly the chains break with a snap. Xiaoman looks around fearfully, not realizing what's going on. Jianche says she didn't realize the situation she was in. He pulls out some kind of scroll. He doesn't care how much she likes the role, but they'll talk about the contract first. The girl has 2 choices. She can sign a contract and become his subordinate spirit, or she could refuse and die. Xiaoman silently opens the scroll and reads. In the first 2 paragraphs, it says that she cannot harm Jianche and must prioritize protecting him. She is obligated to love him with all her heart, cook and do the housework, committed to ensuring Jianche's physical and psychological happiness and health with perspective, and helping him fight the mysteries. She says he's naked and clutches the scroll with rage. She asks how he could write that she should provide him with warmth and care when he is sad or bored. She says she'd rather die than perform such a thing, and starts tearing up the scroll. But suddenly she notices that it's written into the contract that he has to help her find her head. There are several students sitting in a classroom in the real world, and the principal and teachers are discussing something. Suddenly someone begins to materialize in the aisle between the desks. Jianche is happy that he was finally able to return. The students in the classroom are shocked. The teachers and principal open their eyes in shock as they recognize their student Jianche. Fu is ecstatic that it is indeed Jianche who has completed the task. The disciple in the background pales, unable to understand how this is possible. The school staff surrounds Jianche. The principal offers him tea. The teacher offers to examine him. Jianche doesn't understand what's going on. The teacher says she saw his great potential from the beginning. The principal says that Jianche has completed the nightmare regimen and is the best student in their school, and tells him not to shy away from praise. Jianche says he's not embarrassed. It's just that the tea in his hand is scalding hot. The teacher says that the principal should have cooled the tea a bit before giving it to Jianche. The principal tosses the tea to the side and orders the teacher to put it away so as not to hurt Jianche's hands. Suddenly, someone calls out to Jianche. He turns around at the voice and frowns. A pink-haired girl stands in the doorway. She puts her hand on her waist and asks if they can go outside to talk privately. Jianche recognizes Ying Yao and doesn't understand why the first beauty of their school needs him. He thinks his main character's aura has been activated, and she's suddenly fallen in love with him. The sun is setting outside. Ying Yao and Jianche are standing on the balcony overlooking the courtyard of the school. She congratulates him on completing the challenge and surviving the nightmare mode. He decides not to tell anyone about Xiaoman just yet. He says Ying Yao is even more awesome because of the shadow contract. Ying Yao smiles and says he doesn't know what he means. She wonders if he himself signed the secret contract. Otherwise, how did so many of his classmates die? Xiaoman says you need to be able to prioritize and set aside pride to achieve a goal. Ying Yao looks at Jianche, who doesn't know what to answer her. He mentally asks Xiaoman why Ying Yao is aware of her existence. It turns out that after signing the contract, subordinate spirits can interact with each other. Jianche is dissatisfied that he didn't know earlier. He is not happy with the turn of events, for he wanted to hide the existence of the secret contract. Ying Yao asks how many items Jianche's spirit asked for in exchange for signing the contract. Jianche doesn't understand the items Ying Yao is talking about. Behind Ying Yao, her spirit appears. She asks if he was the one who killed Li Xiaoxiao and Li Jiahao. She asks him not to lie to her, for she is the one involved in the deaths of 13 people from her class. Xiaoman says that people are always at a disadvantage when contracting a secret. She says he's lucky she treats him so well. Jianche realizes that the 13 people from their class who were killed were the sacrifice she made as payment for the contract. Ying Yao asks him not to be nervous and opens the app on his phone. She says they shouldn't worry, since the two of them are the only ones with secret contracts. She suggests they exchange contacts. The clock on the tower reads 5 p.m. The trial in the secret world at Tianqing School has been completed. The parents of the students are standing in the courtyard of the school. School officials are about to announce a list of those who died in the ordeal. This year, 3 pupils took part. A total of 31 participants died. Jianche realizes that there will be trouble with Ying Yao. Xiaoman offers to kill her. Jianche grits her teeth and says that a beauty like her, daily killing won't be good for her skin. He says you can't do that in the real world, but lets her do whatever she wants in the secret world. Xiaoman doesn't relate to the secrets from the secret world. Jianche decides that you can't tell anyone about the existence of the heavenly prison. Xiaoman decides to listen to him. Jianche is pleased that he was able to influence her. To his right, some woman is crying for a dead child with the name Xiao Xiao. A blonde woman settles on the ground with her spouse, crying and asking how this could have happened. In their background is a man in a wheelchair. A man in a wheelchair with a bald head and sensors calls out to Jia Hao. It's his father, a cancer patient. Li Xiao's father is furious and tells him to bring his daughter back to him. The guard stops him, asking him to calm down. Jianche looks at the man sympathetically. Xiaoman asks if he sympathizes with them. Xiaoman replies that he does because they are truly dead and will not be reborn. The students were obliged to participate, but they were not forbidden to leave at will. The students decided to stay on their own initiative. Suddenly, someone calls out to Xiaoche as he reaches the parking lot. The girl says that he's had enough of his clouds because she almost tore her throat out while she was calling him. Jianche recognizes his sister and says he was just thinking about the test. The girl rubs his hair and tells him it's time for them to go home. She promises to cook his favorite spicy pork. The sister's happy that Jianche is doing well. She says that with his grades, he won't get into university, that she has already found him a job. Xiaoman angrily looms over them and asks why his sister won't let Jianche go to the secret world. Xiaoman says that as soon as she finds her head, she will punish her sister immediately. Jianche says don't dare make an attempt on his sister. The sister asks what's going on with Jiaoche. He replies that everything is fine, warding off Xiaoman, who is invisible to everyone. Jianche says he passed the test, completed the nightmare mode and the secret mission. His sister warily stares back at him. My sister rolls her eyes and says you don't have to jump above your head to break your legs later. She says he doesn't need to be brave in front of her, because she knows what he is truly capable of. She says she needs to find his prom clothes and that he shouldn't go to the secret world anymore, since she got him a job at the factory. The graduation ceremony has begun. The students are gathered in the spacious hall. Jianche decides that working in a factory is not his dream, and in this world he will earn money in a different way. Because of winning the test, his grades went up a lot. He thought he would receive everyone's praise and respect. The school hides every student's grades. Suddenly someone asks to sit with Jianche. Xiaoman says it's important to find your place and occupation where you'll be happy. Jianche was approached by Ying Yao. She had a worried expression on her face. Jianche asks why she didn't sit with her second class but sat with his third class. Xiaoman says not to be distracted by her and to be wary because something is going on in the hall. Jianche asks what's wrong. Ying Yao frowns and says something is happening on the stage. Jianche turns his gaze there. On the stage behind the podium, the principal stands behind the podium and gives a speech. Jianche doesn't know what it's about. He looks closely and wonders if the principal's wig has fallen off his head. Suddenly the hall lights go out. Blood falls on the microphone the director was speaking into from somewhere above. Jianche turns pale and looks up. The other students turn pale and open their mouths in horror, digging their fingers into the arms of their chairs. Above the principal hangs a multitude of shadows bound by barbed wire. One of the shadows descends lower and stares predatorily at the principal. One of the students is unable to contain her stress and squeals in horror. The students start running out of the hall. Some try to find the teacher. They realize that the mysteries have invaded the real world. Somebody's got medals of honor hanging on their chest. Somebody says a bunch of scum didn't learn anything from the ordeal. Unit 3031 arrived. Zhou Yun said that it was a manifestation of the spirit that lives within him. The disciples turn pale as they recognize the one in front of him. He continues to scold them for their reckless behavior. Zhou Yun turns his attention to the hall. He recognizes one student and realizes that he was the one the superiors were talking about. Jianche sits calmly in his seat. The man with the scar thinks that one is amazing. Jianche sits with a calm expression on her face and does not react in any way to the man's gaze or what is happening around her. Zhou Yun smiles at him. Jianche wonders why the latter is staring at him so lovingly. Ying Yao, that it's the man from the Bureau of Oddities, came here himself. John asks how secret they are. Ying Yao says universities are purposely raising the hype around enrollment to test students' reactions. The Bureau of Oddities is a government agency. They made their first appearance at the school's graduation ceremony. Something incomprehensible is happening. Jianche realizes that some big event is expected. Xiaoman asks if she should stab the man who scared him. Jianche says he wasn't scared of anyone. Xiaoman says that she can easily handle him since the spirit inside him is only a level 4. She will easily befriend him. Jianche replies that attacking an authority figure is breaking the law and he doesn't want to go to jail. She replies that it's no big deal. Zhou Yun demands silence and says he doesn't want to hear anything from now on. In the 121st year of the secret world, 3,214 residents of the mountain region disappeared in an instant. Their skins were made into clothes and hung on the balconies of their dwellings. In the 122nd year of the secret world, a clown massacred a clown in an amusement park, killing 144 people. You can enter the secret world, but creatures from the secret world can also enter the real world. Plenty of people entered the secret world and came right out. Many barely completed the task. You don't have to wait for the end of the world to realize how important it is to fully complete tasks in the secret world. Zhou Yun's goal is very simple. He wants to conduct another trial. He says that those who don't want to participate can leave the hall now. To those who remain, he, on behalf of the Bureau of Oddities, will personally administer the oath. The students look at him fearfully. Students who complete this assignment will be enrolled in Tsinghua University in the capital city. Those who distinguish themselves can become alternate members of the Bureau of Oddities. Plus, there are other rewards waiting for the winners, which they will learn about later. He tells those present to make their choice. The students resent the suggestion. They are sure that the Oddities office can take care of the mysteries without the help of the students. Students begin to leave their seats and exit the auditorium in a hurry, continuing their outrage. Jianche lowered his gaze and did not get up from his seat. The other students walked by. His arm tensed and trembled as he tried to push himself off the chair. He silently asks Xiaoman to let him go since he doesn't want to participate. He says that he hasn't had time to rest since his previous visit to the secret world. Xiaoman replies that he promised her to find her head, so he needs to return to the secret world. Jianche says she's not allowed to control his body. After all, she's contractually obligated to obey him. She replies that he agreed to find her head first, and signing the contract has nothing to do with it. He promises to nail her. Xiaoman replies that if she dies, the person might go crazy. They might be paralyzed, or die instantly with her. Jianche doesn't understand why the textbooks don't say anything about it. Zhou Yun praises the remaining ones. 200,000 yuan will be transferred to each of them. The director himself will hand over the money to the guardians. Zhou Yun takes out a device to travel to the secret world and says it's time to start. Jianche cries and tries to get up from his seat, begging Xiaoman to let him go. The countdown begins. Zhou Yang wishes all the participants good luck. The system advises you to establish relationships with your teacher and students as soon as possible. Level 3 task. Students enter the classroom in the middle of the lesson. The teacher smiles and invites those who have come to come in quickly and close the doors behind them. In 5 days, you have to attend the final exam at the School of Broken Bones. The time to complete is 5 days, but you can't leave before the second. For the first 2 days, you can't opt out. The man from the Bureau of Oddities tricked them. The teacher asks the students to greet the newcomers. He asks the newcomers to introduce themselves and tells Curly to do it first. The guy looks at the students excitedly. He says his name is Wang Dafa. He is 18 years old. He likes to sing, rap, and play basketball. He also likes to eat chicken. He turns to the teacher and says he's finished. The teacher tells him to take an empty seat. Jianche thinks that it can't be that simple. Wang Dafa meanwhile walks happily to his seat. The teacher grins back at him predatorily. One hand blows Van Duff's head to pieces. Jianche turns pale, realizes what the catch was, and asks why they like hitting their heads so much. He asks Xiaoman to deal with the teacher. She replies that she spent all her energy controlling his body and needs to recover. Jianche gets annoyed and realizes that she's saying that on purpose. The system gives a clue that the teacher is expecting someone interesting, as his life is very monotonous. Jianche decides he can do it. He steps forward and introduces himself. He is 18, proud of his basic skills for urban survival and smartphone use. He says that those close to him call him Jianche, but his students may call him Cool. Wang Defa revives next to the door. He rips off his jacket and yells his name. The student is puzzled and calls him Cool with uncertainty. Jianche shouts his name again and pulls off his shirt. Already a few students are howling his Cool. Jianche shouts her name again and takes off her turtleneck, remaining topless. All the students yell that he's cool and jump up from their seats. Wang Defa and Ying Yao stand behind him with annoyance and longing on their faces. Jianche yells for the students not to stop. He starts to take off his pants. The teacher stops him, as he doesn't want a reprimand from the principal. He tells him to get dressed and go to his seat. Jianche is satisfied that he has successfully passed this test. The teacher asks for silence and invites Ying Yao to introduce himself. She steps forward with a proud gait. With a precise blow to the back of her head, she smashes the teacher's head through his own desk. She introduces herself and says that she is 6 years old and that she likes to kick buildings. She says that everyone should be afraid of her. The teacher excitedly pulls his head out of the desk and praises Ying Yao, inviting him to take a seat. He invites Wang Dafa to introduce himself once more. The one introduces himself again and from lack of imagination says he likes to eat out of the toilet. Since the English teacher had her tongue cut off by the principal, the teacher will now teach the class. He says to listen carefully and hopes the school board will punish him if he does not teach well. Jianche is amazed that the secret world is so modern. Since English is taught here, what else should be expected? In the cafeteria, students sit at tables and eat lunch. Some are just coming from the serving line with their lunches. On the spread, the students have organs that they are happy to devour. Wang Dafa says he lost the ability to resurrect himself. Another student says his classmates played with his head with their feet like a ball. John Che says that they break his arms for wrong answers, and with these methods he will become a genius very soon. Yang Xiang says there are 5 of them in this round and suggests working together and sharing information. Hu Junji says that the one is right, and they should help each other for maximum efficiency. Ye Qingyao says there is nothing to discuss yet, but if they are put in the same room, it will be easier for them to communicate and take care of each other. Jianche is encouraged that in this school, boys and girls live together. Xiaoman says it's good to learn from the mistakes of others rather than kicking up bumps on your own. Night falls. The lights go out in some of the dormitory rooms. Jianche stands in his room and looks at the pink bedding and scattered girl stuff on the bed. He cries with happiness and thanks the gods. He thinks he can finally fulfill his dream of spending the night next to a girl. Someone appears behind him. Jianche flinched in surprise. He turns around with his eyes wide open. Some man greets him and says he has to tell him about the dorm rules. He says the lights in the dormitory are turned off at 9 p.m., and that's when the curfew kicks in. It is also strictly forbidden to enter the old dormitory building. The man says there are not enough places in the hostel, and so they mix girls and boys. He says the only rule of behavior with girls is no pregnancies. The Commandant enjoys looking after the boys and girls. He has put cameras in the rooms for safety. Jianche looks at him with disgust. The Commandant looks harmless, but he's actually a pervert. Jianche notices a note on the table. In the note, the girl writes that her name is Ji Xiaoling. She says he can take her goodies, but he has to find her to meet her. Xiaoman says that she's level 6 and can be easily dealt with. Jianche asks how her strength recovered so quickly. Xiaoman replies that she lied to him for his own good so that he could solve his own problems. Jianche is looking for the goodies the neighbor was talking about. He finds a case of candy bars, chips, and cookies. He thinks a Coke would fit right in here. Jianche realizes that he'll have to borrow food from his roommate for the next couple of days. Xiaoman says he's ignoring her on purpose. Jianche reads his character information. He has level 1 and 105 units of secret power. Each level increase grants 5 points of arcane power. The higher the strength, the more influence forbidden things can have. It's more important to know the technique of control than to have some kind of power. He decides to open the burial urn. He gets a butterfly-shaped beret, a fashion magazine, and a black market. It's also how he gets an official pass. Jianche looks at the magazine in disgust, because he has a real cute neighbor. Xiaoman calls out to him. She holds up the pass and begs him to walk with her. The pass allows you to walk around the dormitories without hindrance. He doesn't understand why they need to go out for a walk. Xiaoman says they can look for her head. Jianche notes the shift in her tone. She says he's paying attention to the wrong things and they should take a walk. He says he will definitely look for her head, but not now. He wants to do the main mission first. She grudgingly asks what could be more important than her head. At this time, the lights in the dorm hallway go out. The door to the room creaks open. That's where Jianche comes out. He realizes that he needs to be quiet to avoid being seen by the Commandant. Ying Yao comes up behind him and asks him why he is also awake. Jianche jumps up and shrieks in surprise. He pulls himself together and asks why she is awake. He hopes he didn't wake anyone with his screaming. He asks why she left the Commandant's room. She asks him not to speculate. She says there's no way the Commandant will wake up before morning and she wanted to go to a closed dormitory and invites him along. Xiaoman says that they better stay away from Ying Yao because no one will notice if someone does something. Jianche agrees. He says he agrees to go with Ying Yao to the closed dormitory. Xiaoman doesn't understand what happened. Ying Yao tells him to follow her. She knows where the old dormitory is and will lead him to it. Jianche wonders how she dealt with the Commandant. Xiaoman resents him for not listening to her. He decides that walking around for nothing is stupid, so he'd better go to the old dormitory. He keeps in mind that the dormitory is being closed for a reason. If the entire dormitory building was closed, the extent of the internal secrecy is unimaginable. Xiaoman says that one should never stray from one's main goal, even if more interesting goals appear. There are rats running through the corridors of the abandoned dormitory. The glass in the windows is broken, and there are holes in the ceiling. Jianche excitedly looked around, following Ying Yao. The girl says that from her observations, there are only 6 floors, and asks if they should split up. Jianche says that according to the rules of horror movies, They can't be separated and need to survey the place together. Ying Yao says there's logic in that and agrees to go together and look out for each other. Jun Che had long ago realized that she didn't just walk up to him and her intentions weren't pure. Even Xiao Man noticed some kind of trickery. They begin to survey room after room. Ying Yao reads the diary and Jun Che examines the lockers. He glances at Ying Yao from time to time as he doesn't trust her. He thinks it's better to be closer to her to understand her intention. Ying Yao announces that there is nothing on the first floor and suggests going up to another floor. Water drips from the faucet in a measured manner. Ying Yao looks around while Jun Che opens the window. She looks somewhere while Jun Che reaches for something on the shelf. They are she of the warehouse, examining rack after rack. Jun Che is exhausted from climbing the stairs. He asks how much longer they have to climb. They reach the span of the 6th floor. Jun Che is happy that there are only 6 floors in the building. Xiao Man warns Jun Che to be careful on this floor, for evil energy can be felt here. Jun Che notices that this floor is too clean compared to the previous ones with rats and broken glass. Jun Che thinks that there are no clues in the dormitory, as if the clue has been hidden by someone. Ying Yao twists the handle of the door, but it turns out to be closed. Jun Che asks what happened. They are in front of room 614. Ying Yao says that this is the last room in the dormitory. Suddenly the ringing of a bell is heard. Ying Yao frowns. Jun Che warily looks around and listens in. Some girl is smiling broadly. Suddenly the lights on the floor turn on. Everything is colored red. The squeak of the door handles turning can be heard. Jun Che and Ying Yao became alarmed. Suddenly, from inside all the rooms, there is a loud banging on the doors as if someone is trying to get out. Ying Yao realizes that this is a trap and they need to leave. She starts to run away with a frightened expression on her face. Jun Che tries to stop her, but the girl won't even listen to him. Xiao Man says that this is the kind of thing she was talking about. Jun Che realizes that the girl just ran away. Suddenly, a bunch of hand-like shadows burst out of the room, knocking the door to the floor. Jun Che flinches in surprise. From other rooms, kicking doors off their hinges, similar creatures consisting of masses of arms begin to appear. Xiao Man lands on her bare feet. She decides to take material form for a while to help him escape. Jun Che is surprised that she has this ability. She tells him to hurry up and run away because there are too many shadows. The shadows didn't appear until they reached the 6th floor. Apparently, there was a reason and a purpose. It was as if the mysteries were preventing them from exploring the last room of the dormitory, because they had a chance to attack earlier. Hordes of hands approach Xiao Man and her chains. Xiao Man tries to conjure more chains to restrain the shadows for as long as possible. Jun Che grabs her hand and pulls her behind him. Xiao Man is confused, but Jun Che doesn't let her free her hand and runs away with her. What he has started cannot be stopped, but Jun Che does not want his efforts to be wasted. They pile into the room, hidden from the shadows. Xiao Man asks why he didn't listen to her and run off alone since she wanted to distract them. She asks why he's been quiet and tells him to find a way out soon so he doesn't die out here alone. Jun Che takes her by the shoulder and turns her in the direction he himself is looking. A girl in a long blue skirt is standing by the window. Xiao Mao finally understands why Jun Che didn't answer her. The girl says that she and her lover are separated by mountains and seas, and they cannot be leveled. The sea can be swum across and the mountains can be crossed on paths. She says their love can level both mountains and seas. She cries and says that the thought of conquering the whole world with love does not let her go. Xiao Mao says you should always trust your inner feeling and intuition. The girl shines in the light of the moon. Jun Che stares at her without moving. He can't tell if she's a ghost or a regular inhabitant of the world. She looks different from ordinary girls. The system tells her that she was close to seeing a sky full of stars, but it suddenly lit up. Suddenly, Xiao Man calls out to him, snapping him out of his train of thought. She shouts for him to finish thinking about nonsense soon. The door is being broken in from outside, but Xiao Man holds it open with her body. She says there are a bunch of shadows, and if they break in, they'll just drown them. Jun Che grabs the unknown girl's hand and says that they need to get out of here. He yells for Xiao Man to be patient for a bit. Suddenly, the hand that Jun Che was holding turns into butterflies. The system notifies you when a task starts. Evil tongues are scarier than a gun. The girl simply turned into butterflies that fluttered out the window, announcing the start of the task. Suddenly, shadow hands burst through the door, breaking out pieces of wood. Xiao Man flinches in surprise. She says there's no time left and it's time for them to leave. She drags Jun Che behind her by the scruff of his neck. She jumps onto the windowsill and holds Jun Che in her arms. She tells him to hold on tight. He says it's too early for him to die. Ying Yao turns around and frowns upon hearing the shout. It turns out to be Jun Che in the arms of Xiao Man, who jumped out of the window. Several ghostly hands are flying after them. Jun Che flies and screams. His hair is disheveled and he has a look of utter terror on his face. Xiao Man lands a sharp jab. Jun Che threw his head back. He feels violently sick. He clenches his lips against the vomit. Xiao Man is satisfied with the result of her labors. Jun Che leans over the asphalt and vomits. He wipes the corner of his mouth and remarks that that was cooler than the ride. Ying Yao holds out a handkerchief to him and asks him how he feels. She asks why he didn't run away when she said he did. He says he ran to the restroom, but she actually ran away too fast. The girl considers him, but suddenly her gaze darkens. She asks if he found a clue or a task. Jianche shudders at the correctness of her guess. He tells her to guess. She's telling him to guess if she'll guess. He says that's enough guessing and that he got the clue, but it's bedtime for them, and hands her her handkerchief. He violently walks away. Ying Yao looks after him. She says $100,000 will buy a clue from him. He says he is not for sale and everything should be achieved through honest labor. She offers him 200,000 euros. He hesitates and asks if she wants to take the assignment away from him. She asks if her monthly budget isn't enough for him. She suggests he make a deal. He says the clue is in room 614, and it's a picture of a beautiful girl with big breasts, but the building is full of tentacles. She says that if he got out, so can she, but what's the point of him participating if he's afraid? John Che replies that the person who told him the same thing is now on the 7th day of mourning. He leaves and says he has to rest and that he doesn't want to disturb her. He suggests we see each other tomorrow. Her secret asks why she didn't sacrifice John Che to him. He tells her not to forget the terms of their contract. She says she'll get her chance soon, and wants to give Xiaoman to her father to investigate her properly. Mystery asks about her unusual generosity. She says that she has cheated him and has no money even for her own needs. She is sure that the mere thought of such wealth is enough for him to be satisfied. But John Che hears everything. When you have to choose between two unpleasant outcomes, you have to remember what you were running from in the first place. The wall clock reads 5 minutes to 9 in the morning. John Che wakes up and asks Xiaoman how long he slept. She says it's still a full 5 minutes before class starts. Jian Che abruptly jumps up and asks her why she didn't wake him up. She says she woke him up, but he slept like a dead man and didn't want to wake up. He hurriedly pulls on his clothes. With his backpack over his shoulder, he runs into the classroom. In the hallway, flower pots are arranged on boxes along the wall. He bursts into the office and yells to be forgiven for his tardiness. Wang Dafa greets him and tells him that they do the first part of the lesson on their own, without a teacher. Jian Che let out a sigh of relief. He thought he would be punished severely this time. Jian Che takes a desk and looks questioningly in front of him. Ying Yao's desk is empty. Jian Che thinks she might have gone to the dormitory alone. Jian Che hopes that he's not the one to blame for her absence or even death. The couple in front are flirting. Jian Che remembers that evil tongues are scarier than a gun about the thought of a lover. An obsessive thought of one girl's lover or someone did something to her. Jian Che looks forward in concentration. He leans over to Mei Liu and asks if there's something he can find out. She just picks her nose, but pays attention to him. He asks if she knows about the student who lived in room 614. She replies that he had better not find out about room 614 or he might get in trouble. Jian Che realizes that everyone in this world is very secretive and he has a fun investigation to do. Suddenly, the creaking of many chairs is heard. Jian Che turns around to look. His eyes widen with horror. His classmates turned around with horrified faces and look straight at him. Xiaoman says he's got everyone's attention. Jian Che is afraid he's stepped on a landmine and he's dead. Mei Liu's neck also curves unnaturally and she looks straight at him, making him wince. She grabs him by his shirt and asks if he has any more questions. Jian Che squeals for her to stay away from him. He recoils and doesn't know what to do. Suddenly, Jian Che notices the teacher entering. He flinches, realizing what he has to do. Jian Che replies to Mei Liu that he doesn't want to ask anything, and if she pesters, he'll scratch her eyes out. He shouts for everyone to stand up and say hello to the teacher. The students look at him disappointedly and remain silent. At the end of the day, everyone stands up, saluting the teacher. All students greet the teacher, who is carrying a red notebook under her armpit. Jian Che thinks he knows how to get the students' attention, whether he needs it or not. The teacher says that the class has been behaving perfectly, and so today they are going to do their favorite experiment. The mysteries began to be interested in science. Jian Che can't decide whether people should worry about the welfare of civilization. The teacher pulls a vial of green contents from under her sweater. She says she needs the help of a couple students for the lab. Jian Che gets a bad feeling. She says that whoever told everyone to greet the teacher and the class president will help her conduct the experiment. Jian Che turns pale and becomes nervous after receiving the fruits of his labors. The teacher holds out a test tube to the class president and asks him or her to describe how he or she feels after taking the contents. The class president fearlessly drinks the green contents. The test tube falls to the floor and is covered in cracks. The student's flesh begins to peel off. He says he feels a little strange. It begins to melt and indicates the sweet-sour flavor of the contents. The teacher is pleased and says the sweet and sour flavor doesn't fit and will have to improve the formula. She turns her attention to Jian Che and asks if he wants to taste the contents. Jian Che takes the test tube in his hands. His nervous face is illuminated by the contents of the test tube. The liquid in Jian Che's hands bubbled and exuded blue-colored fumes. He wrinkles his nose in disgust and doesn't know what he should do next. The teacher looms over him with a threatening expression on her face and asks him why he doesn't drink. Jianche says that it's impossible not to want to drink what the teacher took out of her bra. Jianche says that spending such a good thing on someone like him is a real waste. He talks about the slight scent of her perfume on the flask. He says he can't deny others the opportunity to taste the liquid. Jianche grabs the first student he sees and makes him drink the contents. He says that he couldn't deprive him of such a pleasure. The teacher watches as the student begins to melt after drinking. She looks at Jianche with a stunned look. The teacher agrees that the chance should go to the one who wants it more. She tells everyone to take a good example from Jianche. The teacher tells everyone to take their seats because it's time for the lesson to begin. Jianche is starving. He can't get enough of the snacks from his roommate's drawer and wants a full meal. Suddenly, a pitiful moan comes to him. He jerked back sharply, moving closer to the source of the sound. Real-world schoolchildren sit around the table and suffer from hunger. The air is pierced by the rumbling of hungry stomachs. Ying Yao says that a person will not die if he fasts for a few days. She approaches their table with a blank expression on her face. Ying Yao says they will be able to last 5 days while the trial is going on without food. They won't be able to eat human organs. Jianche frowned and doesn't understand whether she is fine or not. She notices that he doesn't look too hungry. Jianche replies that he's just used to being hungry since childhood. Yang Xiang says that saying to fast for 5 days is easier said than done. They won't die in 5 days, but their bodily functions will be severely affected, without mentioning that they are in a secret world. Ying Yao says it's because of their fear of canteen food. She says she tasted the food, and the taste is not that bad. Yang Xiang says that today is the 2nd day, which means he will be able to leave this place. He says he has no information on the assignment. He gets up and walks away. Hu Junji calls out to him and tries to stop him. Hu Junji says he will talk to him. Wang Defa volunteers to go with him and look for a way to get some proper food. Wang Defa says she misses her mother's extreme dishes. Ying Yao says not to count on a loser and suggests discussing a more thorough collaboration with Jianche. Xiaoman tells him to be careful because the girl looks friendly, but she and her spirit are up to something. Ying Yao and her spirit are filled with evil intentions. Xiaoman says they shouldn't do contrary this time. She says they should stay away from Ying Yao and her spirit. Jianche says it's too early for him to fall in love, plus he's not earning on his own yet. He says they have the same clue and they'd better talk when she reveals herself. She reminds him about the money, but he pretends he doesn't know what she means. Ying Yao grits his teeth and says that in that case, it's every man for himself. Jianche gets up from his chair and leaves. Xiaoman is pleased that the girl is beyond angry. She says that he did the right thing by deciding to stay away. Jianche agrees with her words. Jianche doesn't understand why the girl has such evil intentions towards him. Also, she didn't show up for class, but nothing happened to her. Xiaoman says that it would be good to explore the surroundings at night. There is no progress in the trial, and Jianche wants to find a way to advance the progress of the task. Xiaoman's sympathy level is 38. When the score is 50, 100, or 200, it will be possible to extract some of her strength. Jianche was interested in the moment of power extraction. He suspects that there are hidden capabilities. He says they're not going out tonight to explore the area, but to do something else. He says it's time for them to take a walk outside the school. Xiaoman jumps up happily. The entrance to the School of Broken Bones. Night reigns over the land. The system alerts that Jianche has left the test area. The number of resurrections is 1, but a glitch occurs. Xiaoman laughs at the sight of Jianche. He says that these clothes are too small for him, and they're also women's clothes. A special blood-colored uniform. After putting it on, you become indistinguishable from the mysteries. Xiaoman hugs you as she continues to laugh. Jianche asks her to stop. After all, he is trying for her sake. He asks her to protect him. She laughs and says she will protect him with her life. She assures him that he can count on her. She asks if he has money for a cab. He frowns and says it's tactless to ask people about money. Tina says she'll pay him back double the money. He yells that he'll get it himself and he doesn't need to paw him everywhere. She asks if, like his grandmother, he hid the money in his underpants. Jianche replies that it's none of her business. Both turn their attention to the motorcycle that has just pulled up. Kuchisaka Onna turns out to be driving the motorcycle. Jianche presses her lips together and asks why she was the one who came. Kuchisaka Onna frowns and considers him. She asks if he has changed his orientation. He replies that he had thought about their next meeting, but had not imagined her like that. They drive down a road surrounded by dense forest. Kuchisaka Onna rides with her helmet in front of her, and Jianche holds on to her. He says they were lucky to meet like this by chance. She replies that she has eaten too many people and is on her way to buy digestive pills. Jianche frowns in response. He continues to drive and hold on to the mystery. Jianche asks her to forgive him for the things he has done. He thanks her for the scissors. Kuchisaka Onna gets annoyed and tilts her helmeted head slightly downward. She turns the wheel sharply and stops. She takes off her helmet and tells Jianche to get off the bike. Kuchisaka Onna says he's very cheeky, Roz used her scissors but completely forgot about her. Xiaoman says he likes to annoy the mysteries with his behavior. She says she waited for him for many days, day and evening, while she ate, washed, slept, but never waited. He puts his hands out in front of his face and says she didn't tell him the address of her house. She opens her mouth to reply but says nothing. She frowns and covers her mouth sullenly. Kuchisake Onna blushes and looks away, not knowing what to say in response. She tells Jianche to sit down and says she'll forgive him this time. He asks again what about next time. She stops in the road. The light from the headlights falls in front of the motorcycle. Xiaoman says they're on the spot. Jianche says he didn't expect to hit a bank in the secret world. Xiaoman replies that this is not a bank, but the only trading house in the secret world. She calls out to him to follow her sooner rather than later. Kuchisake Onna snickers, lowering her head. Jianche looks back at her sympathetically. Kuchisake Onna looks down sadly. She accepts the situation. The other Kuchisake Onna said that they are allowed to fall in love, but marriages between mysteries and humans are strictly forbidden. She's been told that's the only rule about relationships in this world. Kuchisake Onna says she still doesn't know his name. He smiles and says his name is Jianche. She tastes his name and pulls a barrette out of her hair. She says this may be their last meeting and offers him a parting gift, holding out a hairpin. He is surprised, opening his eyes and mouth, but later he smiles and agrees to accept the gift. Kuchisake Onna rides back down the highway on her motorcycle. The hairpin she gave him would save his life at a crucial moment. She hopes he never needs that hairpin. Jianche wants to hide the hairpin well so as not to lose it. A young man with glasses comes out and greets him. The young man smiles and asks what the matter is that he has come for. Jianche is surprised to be greeted by a man. The young man falls to his knees and apologizes for having such a human being serving him. The boy says that the market house is short of hands. Jianche realizes that because of his uniform, the guy thinks he's a mystery. Apparently, he came to the venue of the trial. Jianche reaches out to him with a smile and tells him to get up from the ground. Suddenly, the young man's head explodes right into Jianche's face. A man with a scar on his face says the young man can't even greet a customer. Jianche realizes that he has stopped reacting as he should to such incidents. The man sniffs the air vigorously and notices something strange. His face darkens, and he says the gentleman has a very heavy human odor. Jianche thought that he had been exposed since the suit didn't cover his entire body. The man with the scar on his face sniffed. He walks up to Jianche and scrutinizes his face. He doesn't understand where the smell is coming from. Jianche thinks he's like a bloodhound. He turns around and looks at his spirit. He asks Xiangman what he should do. Xiangman takes him by the shoulders and asks him to provide the solution to the problem to her. Jianche is enveloped by streams of blue energy. She slides her palms over his body and asks him to let her energy enter him. He says that such words may cause misunderstanding. She replies that everyone thinks in his own depraved way. The man with the scar changes in his face. Streams of blue energy reach his face. He doesn't realize what has happened. Jianche changes his appearance. His hair becomes blonde and long. He says that there is a complete outrage going on. He glares his red eyes at the man and asks how the man dares to doubt him. He creates ice chains and peeks his red eyes from under his blonde curls. He asks why the trading house treats honorable customers this way. An awkward smile appears on the man's face. He doesn't know what to say, but he's clearly amazed at the display of such power. Jianche calls out his number and password. He looks down at the man, soaring into the air. The man bows awkwardly and hunches over, recognizing the customer. Jianche lands a jab. Jianche tells the man to talk less and bring the item he needs immediately. The man looks at Jianche in surprise. On a wooden spread are items for serving tea. A hand takes from it a small cup with a yellow drink. Jianche sits with his foot on his leg. The spread stands on a shivering man in a suit. Jianche inside his head asks why the attitude has changed so drastically. Xiaoman replies that she is not rich, but her head is here. The scarred man apologizes for not paying attention and says they brought a package for her. A man with a spread bowed to leave. Another man rolls up a cart with a wooden box. The men promise not to disturb the lady. The double doors close, the handle creaking back into neutral. Xiaoman appears from Jianche's head and is happy to finally get his head. She opens the box, anticipating that her head is really there. Her head is like a beautiful stargazing painting. She freezes. Jianche looks at her questioningly. He walks closer and peeks into the box, hoping to find Xiaoman's beautiful head there. The box turns out to be empty. Xiaoman can't move. Jianche asks where her beautiful head is. She is covered in dark energy and is silent. He asks if she has started to cry. He convinces her not to cry. Perhaps the head hasn't been found yet, or there wasn't enough money for the ransom. Xiaoman says she sent him money in this box and he sent it back empty. She says she's not sad about the money. Jianche says that it really isn't about money. Xiaoman continues to cry. Jianche frowns and asks how much money she gave away. She gave the executor $1 billion. Jianche asks how she can say she is not very rich. Xiaoman sits with her legs tucked up and says there's no point in money if she doesn't get her beautiful head back. She gets up and says she will give him the money that is stored here. John Che doesn't understand what happened. He grabs her hand and asks what he can do for her to make her feel better. She continues to cry. He tells her she has him and tells her not to forget that he promised to help her get her head back because they are a team and for each other. John Che promises that she will find the performer who cheated her and make him pay her back all her money. All the while he holds her hand. Sympathy levels begin to skyrocket. She snuggles up to him with her whole body, hugging him and thanking him. He gives her a buddy hug around her shoulders and tells her she's lucky to have an owner and can be at ease. Suddenly something catches his attention. In front of him is a giant mechanism with a single hand that makes a loud clicking sound. John Che fulfilled the requirement to increase his sympathy level and was able to extract strength. The giant wheel is marked with various abilities as prizes, such as fatal torture and death traps. So there's also the option of choosing temple roping or energy strengthening. The mechanism starts moving. The gears start turning. John Che silently asks if he can get a temple rope because he really likes jumping. He uses the technique of reverse psychology, where the thing you want most never gets caught. Some people think it's a jinx. He smiles predatorily, pleased with himself. There aren't many witty people like him. The hand pauses on the temple rope for a moment. John Che is horrified. He thinks that this is not the moment he expected the wish to come true. But the arrow is moving on. The mechanism used a deceptive maneuver. John Che cries and clenches his fist because the mechanism scared him. The system says he has received an energy enhancement that increases strength and energy, and greatly increases his defense against spiritual attacks. A yellow cab drives down the highway, headlights illuminating the way. John Che reads about energy strengthening in the system, prompts, and remembers where he heard about it. He remembers that the man from the Bureau of Oddities used spiritual attack with his spirit to influence people's minds and create illusions. Spiritual attacks can kill, and he has a defense against them. He didn't break his limit for nothing. Xiaoman says he scares her. Jian Che was just thinking of the good things about Mrs. Man. He calls her a peony flower. She replies that her head is indeed the most beautiful. They are chatting in the back seat of a cab. The driver looks at them in the rearview mirror and purses his lips. Suddenly the car stops in the middle of the road. The wheels squeak from the sudden braking. Jian Che and Xiaoman nearly fly off their seats. They don't understand what happened. Jian Che leans over to the driver and asks why they stopped. Red energy emanates from the driver. The cabbie turns around. He has insect-like legs on his neck. He says they stopped because he is hungry. He lunges forward, baring his sharp teeth. His eyes glow red. But Xiaoman stops him with a fist in his face. She tells him to go far away and proceeds to punch him in the nose with her fist. Jian Che sits with his knees up, completely shocked. Xiaoman takes the cab driver by his pecs and pulls him towards her. The driver's nose is bleeding and some of his teeth have already fallen out from her blows. Xiaoman is furious that a lowly 4th-level secret dares to be brazen in front of her. The cab driver asks who she is. Xiaoman asks how difficult it is to be a courteous driver. She punches him in the face with her fist. He falls down and Xiaoman continues to beat him with her foot. She says he has ruined her mood completely. The driver begs for mercy. Asta clenches his skull in his hand. He says he was very wrong and will be a vegetarian from now on. Xiaoman sighs and pulls him to the curb by his scruff. John Che pressed his lips together fearfully. John Che wonders why she beat him up like that and even knows how to blow up heads like the bad guys. Jiao Che calls out to her and tells her that they have developed a problem. Xiaoman wipes his bloody hands and tells him to talk about the problem. John Che says she killed the driver and he now doesn't know how to get back to the dormitory. A manual car he can't drive. Plus he doesn't have a license. Jian Che finally makes it to his room. He grunts that his legs are starting to fail. Xiaoman says that even though he was tired, he found the strength to change his clothes. He says it's a matter of honor, since his classmates from the real world are also here. In addition, Xiaoman flew all the way, and so he is not tired. She says that although his legs are tired, he is very talkative and useless without a license. Suddenly, a floorboard under his bed creaks. Jian Che becomes alarmed. He looks under the bed, wondering what it could be. There's a girl looking at him from under the bed. She's wearing the school's uniform. Jian Che gawked in surprise. The girl presses her lips together, giving him the same look in return. Jian Che bounces off the edge of the bed, crying and asking what the hell this is. The girl gags his mouth with her hand. Jian Che turns pale with horror. The girl hisses, putting her finger to her mouth. She asks Jian Che to be quiet and not to wake the Commandant. Suddenly, the door to the room opens with a creak. The girl sits on Jian Che and covers his mouth with her palm. She says that things are not good. The angular figure of the Commandant stands frozen in the doorway. His face is hidden by a shadow. Jian Che and the girl stare at him in anticipation. The Commandant tilts his head to the side, his neck bending unnaturally. He says it's long past his bedtime and why the two of them aren't in bed yet. Jian Che jumps up in fright and turns pale at the sight of the Commandant. Jian Che shouts that he has just returned from a multi-kilometer walk and is not allowed to rest. Footsteps are heard in the ruined dormitory. Rats crawl across the floor and windowsills. Someone's sneakered foot crushes one of the rats. The others scurry away. Hu Junjae worries that it's just the two of them who came here. Yang Ziyang replies that others only think of themselves and won't help them. They haven't eaten in days and won't last long. They decide to look for clues while their minds are at ease. Hu Junji says that they better be careful and leave the secret world if they don't find anything today. Yang Xiang smiles predatorily. He promises himself that these words are the last things Hu Junji will say before he dies. The Commandant stands in the hallway in front of the door to Jian Che's room. His skin is gray and green liquid flows from his mouth. The Commandant says to sleep after the lights are turned off and asks why they are making noise. Jian Che takes out a pair of scissors from his pocket. The girl hides back under Jian Che's bed. She says they'll figure it out without her. Jian Che thinks that he always meets such companions, who at the slightest danger give a run for their money. He decides to try to get him out. Jian Che says that he couldn't sleep because he's trying to save the whole world, and has fought as many as 300 times with the monsters that invaded here. The Commandant frowns, trying to make sense of his words. Jian Che says that in the middle of the battle, he remembered that he needed to be in the room after turning off the lights, but suddenly discovered the power to fight monsters further. But he ended up being late to the room. The Commandant drools green and remains silent. Jian Che is trying to figure out if he managed to fool the Commandant or not. Suddenly, the man leaps out of his seat and rushes towards Jian Che. His gaze focused. He raises his eyebrows in consternation. He holds out a pair of scissors in front of him. The Commandant digs into them. Xiao Man says his level is only 5th and he's only here for looks. Jian Che says he has huge sharp teeth and a lot of rage. Xiao Man offers to lend him her strength. Jian Che says she underestimates him. Jian Che kicks the Commandant, causing him to fly back a couple of meters. Jian Che decides that he can't rely on Xiao Man all the time. After all, he is the main character. Even so, he can't kill low-level mysteries because they, even a level higher, are already crushing in power. At this moment, Jian Che unhappily tisked. He scissors up and jumps on the Commandant, screaming for him to die. A rumble is heard in the courtyard. The director and Zhou Yang are in the office. He walks restlessly from corner to corner. Zhou Yun smiles happily as he prepared to eat a quick lunch. The director turns to him and says there are only a few hours left and they can lift the return restriction in advance. Although the students had previously completed the challenge, but this time they are there for 2 whole days. And if something happens to someone, they can blame them. The Bureau of Strangeness isn't looking for trouble on his head, and it wasn't Zhou Yun who made them stay there for 2 days. The stone has become unstable in the past few years. The arrangement of the stone began to fail. Although it was called a forced ban, in truth it was just an attempt not to cause confusion. Although it wasn't announced, it had happened more than once. Last time the commander was locked in there for 10 days. The principal frowns and reminds him that it's not the commander who's there now. It's just regular kids, yesterday's school children. Zhou Yun puts aside the cutlery on the table. He agrees with the principal's words, but thinks they are their last hope for the future. He takes out a pack of cigarettes. He asks if the principal knows why the Bureau of Oddities interfered with the graduation ceremony to administer the second test. In the normal course of events, such guys after their first introduction to the secret world go to university to become members of the Bureau. But given recent events with the mysteries, the management decided to accept outstanding travelers at once if they volunteered to go. The principal resents that even enrollment from 18 is too early, but if they change enrollment to junior high, things will get even worse. Zhou Yun says that it is necessary to solve the problem because recently the infinite fear mystery has appeared in the city. This mystery feeds on people's fear and is only level 4 but has already killed several level 3 travelers. There are also many dead and wounded among the travelers with lower levels. He's chugging hot broth. Zhou Yang is not ready to tell the principal all the details, but he believes that everyone should be responsible for the situation in the state and for its future. The director asks that we not stage a segment of the movie with Donnie Yen drinking boiling water and having a calm conversation. Suddenly there is a loud knock at the door. Both men are alarmed. Zhou Yun's assistant bursts in. She says that infinite fear is heading towards them. Radar has detected that the speed of the infinite terror is very high, and they need to prepare immediately for its arrival. Zhou Yang orders the immediate evacuation of all the students. The principal says there are a lot of students. Zhou Yun says he will find out the situation, but in the meantime we need to hide the children in a safe place. The girl grabs Zhou Yun by the sleeve and tells him not to be stupid and evacuate with the students too. Besides, there's more than one mystery approaching them. She reminds him that he's just a support and there's no need to join the fight. Zhou Yun pulls his hand out of her grip and says that although he is a support, if the reinforcements are late, he will be able to protect the students. Zhou Yang says he's in the Bureau not only because he knows how to lead, but also how to fight, and these children are their future that needs to be protected. 2 beds and a chair with a desk are visible in the window of the dormitory. Some commotion can be heard inside. Jian Che hits a scissor kick on Commandant, but Commandant manages to cover up with forearms. Jianche jumps up and brings the scissors above him to stab the Commandant. The man squats down. The Commandant leaps into the air doing a forward somersault. Jianche stabs the floor with a pair of scissors at the spot where the Commandant had just been. A creepy smile stretched across the Commandant's face. He deftly lands in a squat, keeping his balance with the help of his arm. Jianche is covered in abrasions, bruises, and blood. He's out of breath and realizes that even a level 5 mystery is a very strong opponent. They've been fighting for a very long time, and he doesn't give a damn. In addition, the Commandant had become more insolent, and now seemed to be amusing Jianche. Jianche has to figure out how to defeat him. Xiaoman offers to lend him his strength to finish the battle. Jianche smiles and says not to try to seduce him with such a tempting offer. Even if he got hit again, he couldn't help but give the Commandants at least a scratch. Apparently, it was his ability that was the problem. Jianche smiles and tells the Commandant that it's not his skill but just a skill and he's not cool at all. Jianche pulls out a model magazine. The Commandant rushes towards the hero. Jianche opens the magazine in the middle and swings it to finally hit the Commandant. He shoves the magazine right in the Commandant's face, and the latter freezes when he sees the contents in front of him. He instantly melts when he sees the contents and the beautiful models. The Commandant embraces the magazine and recognizes the model Miyotakaki. He recognizes it as a limited edition magazine. The Commandant calms down and says he believes Jianche. He says that only he could have fought so desperately. He leaves the room to read a magazine and says goodnight. Jianche says goodbye in return. The Commandant is really a pervert and can be defeated with a simple magazine. The funeral urn is very useful. His roommate crawls out from under his bed and says he's very brave. She says he's the first to experience the Commandant coming into the room after lights out. He asks if he will punish her if he doesn't catch her. She says no, because that's why she sleeps under the bed. Jianche doesn't understand logic. Apparently you can go out all night and no one will notice. Suddenly something catches his attention. The clue says that the cowardly girl seems nice and sympathetic. Ji Xiaoling offers him a snack after the battle. She offers him a peanut bar. She also thinks he could use a first aid kit. The clue says that everyone turned their backs on her after what happened to her sister. Jianche realizes that her sister could be the busty Ming from the 6th floor, and he lives with a key character in the story. Jianche asks if he can ask her something as a reward for protecting her from the Commandant. She says she knows he's investigating room 614, and she can answer any question not related to that room. Jianche asks Xiaoman if he really looks so unreliable. The spirit replies that he needs to be more confident. Jianche says that he's had a curse on him since childhood, and that's why he transferred to this school. He says that he was told that there was an unfortunate person in the school, that he was to save and break the curse. He grabs Ji Xiaoling's hand and says that he realized that she's exactly what he needs. He says that as soon as he saw her, he immediately realized that she was different from everyone else, because she was the kind-hearted girl. He asks if she will help him. The girl is dizzy and doesn't know what to say. Xiaoman says that the girl is cowardly but not brainless and would never believe such nonsense. Ji Xiaoling asks if he is speaking from his heart. Xiaoman doesn't believe what she heard. Jianche says that he is very serious and has little time to help the Chosen One and free himself from the curse. He says the victim is in mortal danger if he doesn't help her soon. She frowns and agrees to answer his questions. She says that if he wants to help her sister, he needs to go to the women's restroom on the 6th floor of the old dormitory. Ji Xiaoling says that her sister put a curse on the whole school, so no one can talk about her case. The girl takes out a doll and hands it to Jianche. Jianche takes the doll with confusion on his face. The system notifies you that a special item has been received. Your sister's favorite doll. It still holds a piece of her warmth. Jianche presses her cheek against the doll and sighs happily. He says the doll smells really good. Xiaoman says he's being a real pervert. Jianche says he just wanted to see if the doll was warm or if it was a metaphor. Ji Xiaoling says to take care of this doll because it will become very useful in times of need. She says that she saw his curly-haired friend. It turned out that Wang Daf had left the dormitory before lights out. Jianche thought that he had no resurrections left, but he dared to go there. Apparently Van Do isn't as simple as he wants to appear. Yes, and others had voluntarily come into this world and could not help but prepare themselves. Jianche opens the first aid kit and takes out a bandage from there. Jianche treats his wounds and believes that there aren't many honest and fair people like him. Xiaoman asks why he was playing with scissors. Jianche says the medicines here are very effective, and he'd like to take a couple with him. She crosses her arms across her chest and tells him not to break the core of their world. Jianche senses that they will have a fight soon. He offers Xiaoman a candy bar. She replies that she has nothing to eat and nothing to eat. He specifies what other bodily functions it can exist without and what it manages to save on. Xiaoman angrily flies forward and says he will cancel his contract with him and destroy him. Jianche says he was only joking. Suddenly, an unbearable pain pierces his head. He clenched his teeth and squeezed his eyes shut. Xiaoman asks what's wrong with him. He starts to glow and says it feels like his head is being pierced with needles. She says it could be a spiritual invasion. That's exactly what happened then on the 6th floor. She says that what distinguishes an invasion from an illusion is that it is quite possible to die from it. Xiaoman says that protecting his spiritual will from influences is very tiring, and he himself must be careful. She pushes and asks why his spiritual power is stronger. She doesn't know how his sympathy level affects his strength. He says anything is possible with the proper effort. He clutches the doll in his hands. Xiaoman says she was just distracted that time. Jianqie says she shouldn't be distracted because they're supposed to protect each other. He tells her to take more responsibility for her work. The doll in his hands leans forward. The doll starts running in some direction. He asks if this is a spiritual invasion. Xiaoman says they need to follow the toy. Jianqie realizes the direction in which the doll ran towards. He looks out at the empty and almost clean 6th floor corridor. The doll stopped in front of the ajar door to the women's restroom. Jianqie opens the door and says he doesn't like to go to forbidden places. He says that the last time he was in the women's restroom, he saw something strange and incomprehensible. He tries to see where the doll ran to. Suddenly, a wheezing sound comes to him. He opens his eyes wide in surprise. He looks at the closed stalls and hears someone's hoarse and measured breathing. He listens to the cubicle. He checks the rooms of the other contestants, and none of them are in their beds. He notices that one stall is locked because the red stripe on the door means occupied. Jianqie says that everyone says they control their physical urges, but natural need takes over sooner or later. He kicks the door open with his foot and tells them to stop hiding so he can finish the mission sooner. Someone starts shouting frantically. Jianqie's eyes bulge in surprise. In the booth sits a beaten Van Duff. He begs not to be killed, and says he will pretend he didn't see anything so that he won't be killed. Jianqie doesn't understand what's going on here.